Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Ember Roundtable, the locals-based think tank. You'll notice that we're missing one of our members today. Actually, the guy who this was his idea, James Darian, of Commutation Construct on locals and on YouTube and so on. He's the one who set all this up, but then he's also he has a prior obligation. He double booked and he had to choose between this and looking at potential wedding venues with his fiance. And it was a tough choice, but he decided to, do the thing that wasn't going to ruin his engagement. So
happy wife, happy life.
Yeah, right. That's right.
I advised him to come on to this thing. It's like, well, you only get married twice, so
Okie dokie. Kevin's
no, James.
wife,
James
I hope
will
you're
have
not
a happy
watching
marriage.
this.
I swear.
Anyway, so we're doing this just with the three of us. And so at our format, for those of you who haven't watched, is every single time we meet, one of us leads a conversation about just practical issues that are facing people today. And so we're trying to engage in practical solutions to those issues and talk about the different, cultural, social, political, whatever things that are going on. I'm going to be leading the conversation today, but let's all introduce each other. Introduce ourselves first. So I'm Truman of the Return to Reason podcast. You can find me at Return to Reason on locals and Twitter and all those other places. And then why don't you guys introduce yourselves, and then I'll tell you, because you guys don't know what we're going to talk about. But you guys introduce yourselves first.
Ladies first.
Karlyn Borysenko, kb.locals.com. I'm on YouTube. Truman and I also do a podcast called Unscrewed occasionally, which we need to schedule, Truman.
Let's do that after this.
Yeah, absolutely. That's me.
Yeah. I'm Kevin of Engineering Politics, engineeringpolitics.locals.com, at the @NG_politics on Twitter, and to search Engineering Politics and anywhere else. I'm a conservative content creator. I do all that fun conservative content. I review a lot of books. I drink a lot of everything during the day, sometimes at night, maybe in the morning, depending on the Dans and why. But yeah, that's me.
Kevin, are you drinking right now?
I'm not. I rushed in here and I don't even have water by me. So.
Can I say this? I saw the best recipe that in my Facebook memories that I'm really glad Facebook reminded me of, which was for an apple cider mimosa. So next time I will be having an apple cider mimosa when we talk.
Do you want to tell the folks at home what's in an apple cider mimosa while Kevin goes and grabs a beverage?
Apple cider and champagne. It's not that hard, but we can. If you want to get really fancy with it, what you can do is you can make a brown sugar and cinnamon rim, like the cinnamon sugar that you put on toast. You put a rim on it, and then you do champagne and apple cider.
So would you do regular apple cider, or would you do like a hard apple cider with it?
No, regular. Well, I suppose you could do both, right? But I would just do regular apple cider. I mean, you don't want to get like totally sloshed off mimosas.
Well, that's what I was saying, is if you wanted a little bit extra kick, you could do like, if it was me, I would do 1 part regular apple cider, unsweetened, just regular apple cider, more cinnamony, the better. And then champagne. And then I do another part of a hard cider. And then maybe like a shot of like apple pucker or something like that.
It's a good idea. I do sometimes do that with like Shipyard Pumpkinhead beer, which was one of my favorite pumpkin beers in the fall. But if you put a shot of vanilla vodka in it,
woo, yep,
mind blowing.
There are so many drinks like that, man. I told Kevin, we had this whole conversation about cider once that I think he asked me if I liked cider. And he
cider
didn't know that
beer,
be like a super.
Yeah, so that was a confusion. The first like 10 minutes was just like, what is there a difference? I'm like, oh wait, that's not a thing.
But I love ciders, and I've had I used to collect ciders anyway. But I was telling him there's a company called Cider Boys that makes these really good different flavored ciders, and they have a pineapple cider that if you get like a shot of coconut rum and you pour like just a half a shot of it in there, then it tastes like that. It has that like pineapple coconut, like some kind of mixed drink, but you can just get completely just hammered off of those like pineapple coconut rum ciders.
Right on.
Anyway, okay, so here's the two things I want to talk about today, and we'll do them. I'll just do them one at a time. The first one is, I'll say, is like kind of more philosophical. I just want to pick your guys' brains about this and see if there's any utility that we can derive from this situation. And then the second one is I want to be as practical as possible about it. But the first one's about Norm Macdonald. So for those of you that don't know, Norm Macdonald, the legendary comedian, passed away very recently. 61. He was fighting cancer for 9 years and just didn't tell anyone about it. I mean, absolutely amazing comedian, a personal hero of mine. And it's still been messing with me. And I've been watching all these, like every single day, YouTube recommends new videos to me of like comedians sharing stories about Norm. And these are people across the ideological spectrum. And so I wanted to ask you guys, like, what do you think it is? Like, what is it about Norm and Norm dying that seems to, like, every single person, regardless of their political bent, is like paying homage, paying tribute to Norm, despite the fact that, you know, a lot of his comedy, I mean, you can find clips of, I mean, he has incredibly off-color jokes and they're hilarious. But there is no attempt to, like, you know, cancel him or anything. Instead, it's just nothing but reverence and respect for this man. And I think there's something really interesting and unique happening there that you have people that probably don't agree on anything. But you have, like, Steven Crowder did a whole show, basically a tribute to Norm Macdonald. You have all these conservatives talking about him, but then you have mainstream, like, late night people like Seth Meyers and others who are also paying like homage and tribute to Norm. And so there's something there that's really interesting to me, that the death of this man who is just larger than life when it comes to his comedy and his philosophy. And I think he was even a little conservative. And he seemed like a genuinely good person. If you want to really get emotional, huh?
He was very religious.
It seemed like it, you know, and there's a lot of ways, you know, some people could roll their eyes at that. Some people, like, you know, take it more charitably. But, like, for example, Bob Saget in his video about him was like, you know, Norm would ask me if he could pray for me and stuff, you know, and I guess he talked to Michael Knowles about, like, religion and God stuff, like, somewhat regularly. And so, but there is something interesting that he commands the respect of people across the ideological spectrum, that it seems like it's like this, the death of Norm, like, here's the sequence of things, right? COVID for 8 seconds, or it goes 9/11, COVID for 8 seconds, GameStop and Robin Hood and Norm Macdonald. Those are the death of Norm Macdonald. Those are the things that have united people in the last 20 years that I've seen. And so I'm wondering what your take is on that. If I'm just, because he's a hero of mine, if I'm reading too much into it, or if there's something we can learn, or there's some utility or some way to replicate that. I was just wondering your guys' thoughts on that specific situation before we go to the other thing.
Yeah, ladies first.
I don't know that I have. So I liked Norm Macdonald, but I was never as into him as, like, a lot of the people were. So I'm a little, this is not my area for discussion, but I think something that I did, that I was thinking about as you were speaking, Truman, was the idea that, like, are we even going to have people like this in the future? Like, I might think of someone like George Carlin, right? Who, like, to me, like, maybe that was like my version of, like, Norm Macdonald, right? It was like George Carlin. And, you know, he had kind of like the same impact on people when he died. There was kind of a similar outpouring. Are we even going to have people like that in the future? Do we have an environment today where something like that can even be cultivated? I don't know. That's what I was thinking about as you were speaking.
Well, I mean, I think that that Norm, well, one is he's just a unique person. So in the same way that Karlyn can't be replicated, you know, we're not going to get another Norm Macdonald, but I think even if we had an amazing environment for comedy, that wouldn't happen. Just like, you know, we didn't get another George Carlin, despite having a really robust and, I think, fertile comedy milieu for several decades, particularly in the 90s and early 2000s. But so I think there's that, but I think your broader question of just powerhouse comedians, I don't think so for a while. That the environment's just not comedy involves a lot of tinkering, and you have to be able to just get up and bomb and then refine your act. And you have to have the freedom to do that. And a lot of them don't. And so I don't think so. Like, I think once we lose, so there's always kind of lesser thans that take the place of these people. So just an example is we lost Patrice O'Neal and then Greg Giraldo in pretty rapid succession. And Jeff Ross kind of tried to fill the shoes of Greg Giraldo. And I think Ross is decent, but he's no Greg Giraldo. No one has managed to fill the shoes of Patrice O'Neal. I don't think we'll get anyone that can do that with Norm. And I think comedy is just different too. But I think, like, to your question, after we lose Chappelle, Rogan, Louis C.K., Bill Burr, Mark Maron, there's less than 10, I think, really. And a few of them are young. I will say I found Lisa Lappalucci off of Bridget
Lisa
Fedesi.
Lampanelli or Lappalucci?
No.
Oh, okay.
Lappalucci.
Oh, all right.
I think her name's Lisa Lappalucci.
Name.
It's I know Lappalucci is her last name, and Baby Skeletons is the name of her act. But Bridget Fedesi interviewed her, and her act, I woke my daughter up like 6 times listening to it because I was dying laughing. But she just has the one thing. So I guess there are some. But yeah, I think that's an entirely different topic. But I think your broader question there, Karlyn, about is the environment capable of producing just comedians, regardless of it doesn't have to be a carbon copy of Norm. They just have to be a really good comedian. I don't think so, but I don't know. Sorry, Kevin, go on. I kind of jumped in there to answer a question.
Yeah.
So now you have multiple things to respond.
Yeah.
to.
I mean, so you were the first one that texted me that Norm passed away, and I loved Norm. I thought he's terrific, but like, I know you had like a certain special spot. I mean, you go back to our last Ember conversation. We talked about these load-bearing structures of society, and the 2 specific ones we pointed out was comedy and sports. Comedy is something that I always thought was there, but when we started to, these offline talks between you and I, you always like, oh, comedy is one of those things. I'm like, yeah, sports one of those things too. And you're like, oh yeah, absolutely. And like, we just kind of agreed with each other there. And I think comedy was really, really your thing, and that's what sports was to me. So Norm passing away to me would be like Brett Favre passing away. It'd be something that I would have to like sit there and be like, whoa. And like Kobe was kind of the same thing. Kobe Bryant passed away. It was kind of like, whoa, like it's just like I had no relationship to this person. Like Kobe Bryant was someone whom like I really, really liked him, but I was never a Lakers fan. So it's like not something I really had, a lot of heart into like what he did. But when he passed away, it was like, dude, this is someone I grew up with. This is someone who has objectively shaped my life in a pretty profound way, especially for someone who I've never made physical contact with. So it is strange losing someone like that, losing someone that you've looked up to and kind of modeled to yourself around a little bit. And when it comes to Norm, being able to, because just like you, I was listening to every podcast I could listen to that had Norm Macdonald in the headline. Like, I'm like, I just want to hear what this person says about him. And obviously a lot of the conservatives, because they, I think a little bit want to claim them as their own. But listening to a sports podcast I listen to a lot with Bill Simmons, he's the head of the Ringer, but he's extremely lefty, to the point where it's getting hard to listen to the Ringer podcast at times. But he had a whole episode with just the reverence for the guy, and he had like one of his first managers on, and he talked a little bit about Norm and how they discovered him and like what he was doing, and then the guy went into kind of detail of saying like Norm Macdonald was a guy like. He actually had to hire someone who was kind of his manager, but like a live-in manager, someone who had to like drive him around. He didn't drive, apparently. Like when they met, he didn't like eat food. He only ate ice cream sandwiches because he's like, I don't really like the taste of most food, and so or I don't enjoy eating, so I'm just gonna eat what tastes the best. So he just had ice cream sandwiches. And so someone like really managed his life, but the point was like he had a mind just built for comedy, built for this.
Oh yeah.
And maybe it wasn't built perfectly for everything else. And that's why I think people liked him, is because there's a certain point where you can get to objectively funny, and that transcends political boundaries. It doesn't matter where you're at on the political spectrum. Like, you can't not laugh at Norm Macdonald doing the moth joke, or doing, doing the what is it, Professor of Logic, and like these kind of like dad jokes in a way, right? But it's his
Turd Ferguson, man, go all the way back to SNL. I hate that he was framed as like the SNL like Weekend Update guy, because he did so much. He had that Norm Macdonald has a show. He had it on YouTube and on Netflix. I mean, he was a really good interviewer.
He did
weirdly
sports
enough, and because he was bad at it
for a while. Yeah,
he did the sports show. I mean, the guy was just so prolific. Anyway,
we talk about like learning how to bomb. This guy bombed on purpose and just lived in it. And he was so good at living in that space, which is so uncomfortable for most people.
Oh, yeah.
To bomb in front of a whole bunch of people and just have them not laugh. And it's like, at first, he's always the first one to get the joke. I mean, that sounds stupid. You wrote the joke. You should be the first one to get it. But it's that weird thing. And again, my favorite public appearance with him was the roast of Bob Saget, when he was up there just doing these jokes that just didn't land with anyone in the crowd. And after a while, Bob Saget, you could see, was the first one to get what he was doing. He was bombing on purpose, and he just wanted to kind of like mess with people. And you see Bob Saget, like in the, he's the one getting roasted. So he's in that big, throne chair. And then you see him falling out of the chair, dying laughing, because he's the first one to get it. And then you saw slowly all the comedians and most comedians on the dais start to fall over
getting
laughing.
it. Yeah.
Yeah. And it was just like the funniest thing ever. And it was like something, again, there's like objectively funny that transcends political boundaries, that it doesn't matter where you lie, even on your comedy. Like, he's a deadpan comedian, considered deadpan comedian. Some people like insult comedy. He was not an insult comic. He insulted himself at times, but he was not, he was not Greg Giraldo. He's not Patrice O'Neill, two guys I also love with a passion. And he was just able to kind of get into everyone's, that funny center in your brain and just live in there for a while. Like, I'm actually listening to his audiobook based on a true story. I keep recommending it to you. I want to text
I'm waiting on an Audible credit as soon as I get an Audible credit.
Yeah. Oh man. And you, like, it's a book, obviously you can read it. I try to read most of the books, but this one is read by him. So just like his voice, and normally I read an audiobook at like 1.2 to 1.5 speed. So like to get through it, that slow it down to 1.0. Like I did the first 2 chapters at 1.2. I'm like, no, I got it. It's his delivery, that use of that dead space, that dead air that he uses so well, which is like a technique in comedy that once you master it, you're really, really good at using that quiet space to your advantage, which is why like people see, and I've been told like, I'm funny, I should do comedy or stand up. I'm like, that's an art, like that is way different. Funny people just don't automatically it's obviously a prerequisite for it, but it doesn't just translate into doing stand up. You have to know how to work the audience. You have to know how to work that dead space. And he just did it so well. And listening to that book was amazing. Like I know, he was a pretty religious person, but he knew how to poke fun at himself. And the beautiful part of it, he went in there with so much humility. He's like, I don't know, I'm just some guy, like what he called it, I'm just a lump of coal. And what do I know, man? So I'm just going into this with all this humility and all this grace. And that was one thing that he's able to hit your funny bone, but he was also able to dig a little deeper. And I think that's why he profoundly had an impact and an imprint on so many different people, no matter where they lie in the political spectrum, whether they're comedians or not comedians. I mean, he was considered the comedian's comedian. He could make every comedian laugh for sure. Sometimes he didn't make everyone in the crowd laugh, but he could make every comedian laugh because he didn't
care about that. He was the definition. It's funny. My wife asked me what based meant yesterday, and I was like, and she's like, I had to look up stan. Yes. And I'm like, you're in your 20s. What are you doing? Why don't you know these things? But he was the definition of based. He just didn't care. He did not care. He only cared about what his friends thought of him, what the people he cared about thought of him, and everyone else. I mean, there's this funny, even like Seth Meyers. So Seth Meyers was doing like this tribute to him, and like Norm Macdonald, that I'm Not Norm has been making clips. That YouTube channel.
I was going to recommend that YouTube channel. Yeah. It's so terrific.
And but anyway, that they flashed from like Seth Meyers paying tribute to Norm to he was being interviewed by like Vox or something, and it was a quote from Seth Meyers. It was like, basically the summary was Seth Meyers saying, Norm says some things that I wouldn't say that necessarily. And Norm was like, yeah, that's what I think. Anytime I tell a joke, I think, what would Seth Meyers find funny? What would Seth Meyers think? And then, and like at the, at the very end, they ask him like, so what do you think about, what do you think, what do you really think about what Seth said here? And Norm's like, It's not something I would say. Which is exactly
even like
what
Bill, even like Bill Maher like said, oh, he was great. And he's attacked Bill Maher a lot.
Oh yeah.
And even he's like had to give it up. Like, dude's he's one of the best. You can't deny that, man.
So is there a way to, is that just a unique thing that's unique to Norm, or is there something that we can learn from this to like, to replicate in terms of the broad appeal? Is he just a testament to the universality of comedy? Is there, because I'm just thinking about how, again, his death just seemed like there's this weird thing that people on the left and right are, kind of mutually mourning this guy, and there's something about like mourning and that just you lower your defenses a little bit. You know what I mean? And you're vulnerable, and there's something unique there about it. So is that just a thing that's just unique to Norm, or is there something replicable there, or something we can learn in terms of, appealing to people that we might not agree with, or, that we might not otherwise have common ground with ideologically? Does that make sense? That's just something I'm thinking about when it comes to this.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think, the quote that I've listed for Jeremy Boring said he's great because you feel like you were his only fan for some reason. It's like, I feel like I'm the only fan of Norm Macdonald. And then you realize like everyone is a fan of him. And I think it's kind of what you highlighted before, that he didn't care as much about what the audience thought. He cared about what his friends thought. And I think in a world now that everything is a team sport, like politics is a team sport. If you say something that disagrees with my team, I need to attack you, even if I may personally like kind of like either not care about it, or I might even agree with you. And him kind of bringing that individual element, like he was speaking at you, not at everyone around, not the crowd, the speaking at you, I think is something that can be replicated. He just was like the best at it. You know what I mean?
Sure.
So it's hard, I don't think we'll ever see another Norm Macdonald, but to replicate that aspect of it and make you feel like the guy's talking to you as opposed to just talking to the crowd, I think that's something that we need to try to search for. Even, in a politician, just to say, I'm talking to you. I'm not trying to make this broad appeal to a voting base. I'm trying to speak to you as an individual, is something that can be replicated in a lot of spaces outside of this politics and comedy. It needs to be, some sort of attribute that needs to be acquired. And I think a lot of it is the humility part of it. He always just seemed like he was just a humble person on stage.
Yep.
And that's like the prerequisite for all of this. And I think humility is probably what we lack most as a society right now. No one can admit they're wrong, but also no one can admit that they're not going to go along with their team. And to break up that team division is going to be a key element in moving forward, and something that we need to try to replicate if we can.
What do you think, Karlyn?
Again, it's like, it's hard for me to express it. I don't feel like I can express an opinion on this, just because it's like, it's just not my world, to be honest. So it's kind of like, I'm not contributing as much because it's kind of hard to wrap my head around it. But I will say this, like, listening to you guys talk about him, it's making me want to go back and watch old Norm Macdonald clips now to
Holy shit, dude.
to better understand what everyone
I will saturate. I'm going to inundate you with
You're gonna
links.
send me some stuff to watch.
Oh yeah. The guy
he's gonna go in your locals community at kb.locals.com and just start posting all the I'm Not Norm clips from the YouTube channel.
Maybe I could do a whole reaction series of like reacting to Norm Macdonald for the first time. Because literally, I mean, I really haven't watched him all that much. Like I've watched some of his movies, I think. But
he was in he did one movie, and that's why him and Saget were friends, because Saget directed Dirty Work, which was Norm's movie.
That's the one I saw. Yeah.
And it's hilarious. So funny. His delivery, even just the scene where he clearly just got like ass raped in jail, and he like comes back and he's like that was ridiculous. Absolutely uncalled for. You know the worst part? Well, that's not the worst part, but the second worst part is the disrespect. That's the second worst part. Like just they nonchalantly bring up the rape like later on in the movie. He's like, yeah, let's move past it. Let's go forward. Yeah. Like Chevy Chase is in that movie. He's the doctor. He bet against Rocky in Rocky 3. Hindsight's 2020. Like, this dude is just so funny. Okay. Yeah, I'm gonna
Don Rickles in that movie also.
Yes.
I was so happy to see. I didn't know before I saw the movie that he was in it. I'm like, oh my gosh, this guy is like.
Chris Farley's the dude whose nose got bit off by a Saigon whore.
Sandler's in it for a little bit as the devil, I think.
Yeah, you will burn.
One of his I just gotta say from the book, one of his things, like when young comedians or actors come up to me and say, hey, Norm, how do you make it in Hollywood? I'm say 3 simple words. I tell everyone 3 simple words every time. Meet Adam Sandler. He's like, then you'll make it. Don't worry. It's all you got to do.
In my mind, I thought suck Sandler's dick.
yes. Could have been close. I'm sure that
funny.
it was edited after that.
That's good. Okay. So that, I just wanted to pick your guys' brain about that because I just still have been just thinking about that and thinking about him. I mean, it's weird the way I told you, Kevin, this the other day that I don't normally watch Steven Crowder, but he did an episode for him. And it's been one thing that's been interesting is seeing people that I don't know. And oftentimes, are like, I don't really know a lot about them having very similar reactions and thoughts that I have whenever it comes to Norm has been really interesting. But Crowder said, he's like, I've never had a response like this so strongly to the death of someone I've never met. And I was like, yeah, that's exactly how I feel, which is strange. And I remember even Dave Rubin, after Kobe died, you could tell that he was really processing it. And it was like, he cried and he had a story about it. He cried in an Uber with the Uber driver. They're both just crying about Kobe dying. And I sat on my couch and cried whenever I found out that Norm died. And I'm like, I get it. Anyway.
Gee, a similar story too. I was listening to a little bit of DMX yesterday.
Shit, man. Why you gotta?
I know.
I did a whole post about that. Session. I'm gonna write more about DMX and the importance of rap music, especially from the early 90s, mid 90s. And how huge that was for me. Go on, Karlyn.
I mean, it's like, I don't usually cry when people die, even when it's people that I know, because, I don't believe we ever really die. I believe we just transform into something else and that we always have access to these people. But, I will say that it's the mark of a life well lived.
Yeah.
If people you have never met before in your life are mourning your death. And
if they feel an empty spot from you dying, despite never having met you. Yeah.
And so maybe they were taken too soon, or maybe it was a trap, and all those things are true. But at the same time, I think that it's important to acknowledge that the only reason people have that response is because they lived their life well. They were themselves. They did what they wanted to do. And what you guys were describing in terms of Norm that really resonated with me was the fact that, like, he wasn't trying to please anyone else but himself. Yeah. If no one else got what he was doing, but he was like amusing himself with it, then it was a successful thing. It didn't matter if anyone else understood. And that's something I honestly like really appreciate and really respond to. And I think that's how everyone should try to live their life.
No, I think that's an excellent point. Yeah. Having that there's a parallel between comedy and kind of what's demanded of us right now, just to go on a brief tangent, in that a good comedian will stick with the joke, even if it's not landing, because they're like, this is funny. I don't care if you don't get it. Mm-hmm. I don't care if you don't get it. This is hilarious. And they will commit to the bit and they will commit to the joke, because they're like, the people that matter are the ones who will get this. Mm-hmm. They might not be sitting in this crowd, but the people who, like, it's not for them, I guess. That goes to Michael Malice's thing about humor, where it's like, you can't say that's not funny or you can't joke about that. It's like, that's like saying you can't solve a math problem, therefore the problem is stupid. No, it's not for you if you don't think it's funny.
Right.
And so, but there's a parallel there of, you could just replace the word comedy or humor with truth, where it's like, I don't care if the people in the crowd or the people immediately around me are saying, no, the emperor has no, or is fully dressed. It's like, no, you commit to what's true. And maybe that there is an overlap between comedy and truth there, and that they can be used interchangeably in some cases, to where it's like, why we respect the bravery of comedians who stick to what's funny, regardless of how people react, is because we understand the parallels between that and someone who sticks to what's true, regardless of how people react and the responses they get. And there's a courage that's required for both that is probably, almost a 1-for-1, I would imagine.
What's the worst kind of comedy to you? Or the one we see today is late night. To me, I know that's not a genre of comedy.
Are you talking about like the clapter stuff?
Yes. That it's speaking to the crowd, speaking to the audience, knowing or really forcing your opinion on them. Truth is irrelevant in that case. It's like writing a good
pandering.
book. All good books, especially even fiction books, need to have truth in it to be believable. Even good propaganda needs to have truth in it to be believable. And when you get to what I call the clapping monkey routine, it doesn't matter if it's believable or not. It's whatever satisfies the audience's hunger at the time. It's really how Twitter works, right? You're satisfying the hunger of the Twitter audience instead of truth. And that is why, and then you said, is there a relationship between truth and comedy? I'd advise you go back to our previous episode of the Ember conversation. And then that comedy, I think, is very vital for truth to get out there because it's an amazing truth-telling mechanism. But when you abuse comedy like that and you use it in absence of truth, not only absence of truth, but to aggressively push falsehoods, that's going to really hurt. And that's why you see that kind of clapter comedy is no longer entertaining. That's why you see the ratings are horrible. Is because like people don't believe that's authentic anymore, and that inauthenticity is becoming a huge issue until it's religious. When it becomes religious, then it becomes different.
And I think one of the appeals, and we can end this part, here and bring it to the kind of more meaty thing I wanted to talk about. But one of the things that makes Norm unique is, and I know that we talked about that in our last episode, I've mentioned this multiple times over the last 1.5 2 years, is that we just don't see things that are funny very often. And so that's why that clapter garbage is like, doesn't work and it's not funny, and why it's different than actual comedy, because all that is just a different, it's the same as for a lot of these people like watching MSNBC. It's like, they're just laughing and smiling about, the things that they agree with. That's not the same as someone just making your side hurt from laughing so much and so hard. I was laughing. I got to quit booting these videos up at night because I've been exhausted. I've been working all week, and I started watching clips last night of people talking about Norm. And there was one where David Spade and Conan O'Brien were sharing a story about Norm, and I was just cracking up, just dying laughing with these guys about this stuff. And so I don't know, it's like that's what real comedy is, and we've kind of lost that in a lot of ways. And so that's why maybe that's part of that appeal, is that it's like people don't realize that they've missed it until they experience it, and then they're like, holy crap, where's this been? So I don't know. Is there anything else, any other thoughts you guys have on that, or the comedy or the broad appeal stuff before we get to the other topic? That was kind of my own little pet thing I wanted to talk to you guys about. Sorry for people that are still watching if that doesn't seem like a useful thing, but if it doesn't seem useful, that means you haven't been exposed enough to Norm Macdonald's comedy, and you will realize that it's useful because it might be the catalyst for you to be exposed.
I think it's incredibly useful though. I think this is an incredibly useful conversation to have, because I think one of the main problems is that, or one of the solutions to the problems that we have right now, is that we need to shift culture, and comedy is one of the ways you shift culture. And so how can we have conversations that matter if we don't talk about these things? Yeah, no, that's true. That's true. Okay. So speaking of culture shift, so here's the question that I want us to engage with, that I think is probably arguably the most pressing, or one of the most pressing on people's minds right now. And it's what do I do right now? What do I do right now? And I'm thinking about this specifically in the context of COVID stuff. So I'm just going to go down a list, and I don't have a particular order or any specific thing, but I can give you just kind of what I mean, what I'm talking about, a few examples, and we can just run with it. Does that sound okay? Yeah. Because there are people. So here's just one of the things that got me thinking about this. So I've got a friend, I've mentioned him before, who works in he's an ER nurse in San Francisco.
Him and his wife both are. She's about to have their second kid. They don't know if she'll go back to work afterwards. But they both have had COVID, and they got their religious exemptions because of that. They're like, we don't need to get vaccinated. And she was pregnant. She's like, I'm definitely not going to get this. And she's going to be nursing. And his religious exemption was accepted. But he doesn't know how long it's going to last. And he's in I was asking him, I'm like, why can't you just, do this or this? And he's like, dude, I'm in such a specific field of medicine. He's like, I might as well find another job. Now he could be exaggerating. I don't know. Cause I was like, my guess is you have the skills to go work at a private practice if you wanted to, but you have people like that are like, what do I do whenever it comes down to it? Where they're like, you either get this or you lose your job, and you have a family and you have debt. You took out a lot of student loans to go into this profession. And so now you have to make a decision. There's another guy, he's actually in both of our communities, Karlyn, who he's in a similar situation in Colorado. He got a religious exemption. He doesn't know how long it's going to last. So there are people who are in that situation that I think are asking, like, what do I do? And I think some of them, it's like right at their door where they have to make the decision now. Maybe they were denied or they don't have that as an option. But then there's other people that I think that they have a short period of time where they're like, I don't know how long it's going to last. This is not a sustainable solution. This is not a long-term solution. So I need to be planning and thinking about, what do I do? And especially if you're in healthcare, where it's like, they're saying any hospital that would take federal funds for something has to require this for their employees. I mean, this is huge federal overreach, but that's not even what I want to talk about. But there's just a lot of people that are going to be facing this decision. We have teachers that are facing it in schools. We have parents that are facing this stuff, and so I want to just engage in the question of what, not just the vaccine stuff, but I think also masks. I'm increasingly, whenever I see kids outside, we went to the Very Last Farmers Market yesterday. I see a family, there's like a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old and the parents, and they're all wearing masks outside sitting by themselves. And I'm like, this is not okay. And it's getting harder for me to not say something there, but I don't know if it's the right thing to do. It's like, what do we do about mask mandates in schools? What do we do about vaccine requirements? And I'm thinking about this in the short term. So what I have is, like, in schools, at your job, travel restrictions. And so I'm thinking specifically about mask mandates and vaccine requirements. And the other side of it that I want to at least think about or make sure that that's part of it is, as someone who had COVID, like, I don't feel a strong desire to get the vaccine. I probably would have if I didn't get it, to be honest. And I mentioned this on Twitter before, but I was approved to work from home when I was working for the school district. And that way I didn't have to be in a building with it's just a bad situation. And honestly, that was the only reason why I didn't get vaccinated then, was because I was afraid I would lose my work from home exemption if I got vaccinated. And so I was like, I'll wait. And then it turned out I had COVID, and I was like, okay, fine. And then I was like, I don't want to tell them I had COVID because then they won't let me work from home anymore. And then they fired me. So it doesn't matter. But like, I do have hesitancy about this for people who've had COVID. I think that there's risk, particularly to women. At the same time, like, there's a lot of people who have gotten this and have been fine. And so if a person, is, middle-aged or older and they haven't had COVID, I'm not saying that I think that this should be like the decision of a lifetime for them. I don't think it's as risky as some of us, would like to portray it. I'm not saying it's devoid of risk, but I don't want to make it this, like, I mean, Kevin's had it, right? You had the vaccine, you're fine. Your balls haven't swollen that we know of, sorry, Nicki Minaj's cousin's friend. And so is it something where people should maybe just say, screw it, I'm going to do it? Is there a principled, response here where it's like, I don't want to support this system that's requiring this? So I'm just trying to think of the practical things in the short term, because this is in people's face. That's what I mentioned in that Lindsay conversation where I'm like, the COVID stuff is right here. People need to know right now what to do in all of these situations at work, with their kids. Travel is increasingly going to be a thing. And so like, and also not just for their personal lives, but, you know, is it appropriate for us to start saying, if we see a 3-year-old outside with the mask on, you know, we have basically one side is okay calling us out for being these deplorable, horrible people. And we don't do that. We don't say, hey, you're abusing your kid. This is not, this is a religion. That's what I keep thinking is like,
maybe we should be.
That's what I'm asking. So I'm asking of right now, practical stuff. And I know I just threw a lot of different like little strands out there. You can tug it whichever one you want. But I'm really thinking about the practical right now in this specific milieu with the COVID stuff of, you know, so many people are asking, what should I do? How should I prepare? What should I do? And so that's the kind of the question I want to engage with here. So does that make sense? And I know that there's a lot there and it's a broad thing, but just that general topic. So
I have so many thoughts about this. And, you know, I want to go back to something, frankly, I was really trying to push people to do when the pandemic first started, back when it was like 15 days to slow the spread, which is use the time that you have to start a side hustle so that you are not beholden to anyone else. Now, for people who ignored that advice for a year and a half and are now finding themselves in a position of losing their job because they don't want to get a vaccine and their employer's mandating it, it's too late to do that. But you know, I think the point still stands. I think that people who see what's coming, because this is not, the vaccine is not the last thing we're going to see the government trying to push on us. We still have 3.5 more years of Joe Biden at an absolute minimum, or the Biden-Harris administration in whatever.
It might be an upper bounds, not a lower bounds.
We have another 3.5 years of whatever this is.
Of whatever this is.
Yeah.
And so this is not going to be the last thing. And so, I mean, to be honest with you, my advice still stands is that people have got to start building up ways where they are not relying on other people for income. You've got to start diversifying your income sources. That's really the only time at the end of the day when you're actually free, is when you are able to make money on your terms to pay your mortgage and feed your family and pay your bills and do all of those other things, is when you're not relying on someone else's rules in order to collect a paycheck. So I wish more people had taken this advice a year and a half ago, when a lot of people were sitting around screwing off on unemployment for a really long time.
Yep.
But they didn't. And now this is the situation in which they find themselves in. So that's my first piece of advice. Start building your own businesses.
So what Karlyn just described there, we used to call the American dream, like not to be beholden to someone else. Like I think it's crazy. I think it's crazy, but totally true. And a really, really good advice, Karlyn, is like, go back to like the founding roots of the country. Like, stop being so dependent on, you know, I know we normally talk about government, but you need to have your own autonomy, even from an employer, right? If you're uncomfortable working, you know, with a large multinational company, with someone with a lot of power, you probably should not work at Amazon, right? It's maybe you should go somewhere else, try doing something else. And so, you know, that's you know, really important advice, and something that, it was great if you can follow it early enough. But now if you're kind of stuck in the spot where, you know, you have to make a decision, it's tragic. I was talking to someone the other day, and this guy, he works at a company, you know, high up in the company, but he also teaches on the side at a smaller college. So he does like this kind of like specialized class. And they said, well, two things. They said they're gonna make a vaccine mandate, and he already said no, I'm not going to do that. And they're already like not happy with him. And then they had a diversity inclusion training in which he decided to speak out against it, and now he got fired. Like, he's not able to do it anymore. Now that he's not dependent on that you know, revenue, that source of income. You know, he's already got a really good job, but it's something he really enjoyed doing. It's something, it's like, I'm not going to lie to you, dude. It sucks not being able to do this. It's something I enjoyed. It's something I got a lot out of, because I got to teach the next generation of kids something different. Especially at, more like a tech college where they're like, oh, I want to go to, regular university. And he's like, or like the thing he taught is more of like a trade thing. He's like, or do this, you can make a lot of money in an industry that's in demand right now. And now he doesn't get that opportunity. And that's because he was effectively pushed out. Now that's an instance in which he is not dependent on that source of income, but now put that in a space where someone is dependent on that source of income and them having to make the decision. Okay, do I take the jab or am I going to have to wear this mask all the time? Even though I'm dependent on this income. And it's kind of, I think it's sometimes easier to speak to some of the more, I guess, religious crowd who have, a certain conviction in which they this is my beliefs. I cannot waver on this. That's really how you kind of need to take it. It's like, don't do something because you think society is going to look at you weird if you don't. You have to make the risk assessment based on, your needs, your family's needs, and what you prioritize. I got vaccinated because I did the risk assessment. I'm like, I think it makes sense to get vaccinated. So I did. Now they're already coming out with the possibility of the, second shot and stuff like this, the second booster. And that's the point where I'm like, okay, now it's not making any sense. Now the calculus is changing a little bit. And you're adding an additional variable that it's another unknown out there. And it's like, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to keep following down this path that just doesn't make any logical sense. In the end, it's like, you have to make the decision based on what's best for you and your family, not for society's sake is the big one. If you already haven't been able to make a decision, which, Karlyn brought about, which is, follow the American dream, like try to build your own independence. Don't be reliable on other people. I think there's so many things that we need to go back to more the founding. And another thing that came up the other day, actually, for a work thing is they looked back and it's like, oh man, this, we're talking about risk mitigation, which is now, something in business, which is a good thing. Risk mitigation, you obviously want to mitigate your risk. But right now, when they first said it, a red flag just popped up in my head. Cause I'm like, that has become synonymous with avoiding risk aversion. And that's a bad thing. You don't want to avoid risk because then you're never going to grow if you avoid risk. And that brought up the next topic where they said, luckily, we're waiting on the governor to let us know if we're an essential business. And luckily, we are an essential business. So that was a big success. And in my head, I didn't speak up. In my head, I'm like, that's not a success. That's a failure of society that we allow someone to say if we're essential or not. That is such a failure of something that we would have not taken that crap, a couple of decades ago, but now we're totally in line with it. No one really spoke out about it. No one of importance spoke out about that, I would say. And that's just that attitude. We got to go back to that somehow to be able to be self-sufficient and not rely on labels given by government in order for us to maintain our livelihood.
So I want to ask you a question about something that you said, Kevin. You said you have to do what's right for your family, not for society. And I'm going to be one of the last people that'll say make a greater good case, obviously. But like, let's say, for example, the US, we got into war with like China or something like that. And they needed like, it wouldn't be the right thing necessarily in the short. Like, it's like, is it the right thing for my family if I leave and go fight in that war? Yes and no. Is it the right thing for society if I leave and go fight in that war, or if I stay? And like, yes and no. So I'm not sure that and I'm not saying that you're saying that it's an easy calculus.
When it comes to war, let's put this piece here. I would go to war so my kids don't have to.
Sure.
That's the way I would, do that math there. So I would say it's a bit different, but I understand what you're getting at. Yeah.
I mean, as far as I know, the patriarchy is still alive and well, and your daughter would not have to go to war. Neither would mine. Although, your son,
yes,
you don't have a son yet.
Yes, I do.
Oh wait, no, yeah, you have a son in Florida. Sorry, duh. Sorry. Anyway, I've been drinking again. Yeah. So, but yeah, fair enough. I guess. So let's actually just go down I'll tell you just two things that popped into my head, and then maybe we can take this like topic by topic or scenario by scenario. The first thing that came in my head is whenever it comes to these mandates and stuff, there are two things that are influencing like my future conceptualization of this situation. One of them is, well, there's at least two. One of them is, if you remember, Thomas Sowell writes about apartheid and how in South Africa, and even like in the Jim Crow South, like people didn't, it was not economically viable for them to enforce this stuff, for private businesses to enforce this stuff. Sowell gives the example in South Africa where there were communities where landlords were only allowed to rent to white people, and literally 100% of their tenants were black because they just didn't follow it, and how there were construction businesses where they would hire black people because they're like, this is the best, like, these are the best workers, they didn't really care. And so, and the same thing with the Jim Crow stuff. I mean, the busing and not the busing, the buses, and then the trains, whenever they had separate cars for blacks and whites, it was the government that enforced that stuff. Businesses didn't want to do it. It was too expensive for them to have a set, like, to build entirely separate bathrooms and stuff. They were like, oh, no way, man, this is crazy. And it was the government that was forcing them to actually uphold those unjust laws. So I do have the one thing in my head going, are people just going to say screw it and not do it? I don't know. I have not seen any examples of like systemic yet. Of course, we're so early in this, right? But of people just like, whatever. Like, I've only seen people who say begrudgingly, I hate that I have to do this. Yeah, I got to put the mask on again. I got to
remember, we're still in 15 days to slow the spread. So
that's right.
Pretty early.
We're
pretty early.
Yeah. And so, I understand it. What's funny, I made that joke yesterday. My daughter was washing her hands. I'm like, wash your hands. All right. And you got to count to 10, 5, 10, whatever. It's 15 days. We just have 15 days, kiddo. Anyway, but so I haven't seen any of that. All I've seen is people just begrudgingly, aw shucks, even when they're in situations when they could get away with not wearing it or not doing it, where they still are doing it, but they're like ho-humming about it. And I'm like, that's not, like, I guess that's a good thing. It's better than nothing. At least they're being open about the fact that they don't like doing it, but it's still compliance, but baby steps, I guess. But the other thing that comes to my mind is that this is different than the race stuff, obviously, for a lot of reasons, but one of them is numerical, in that there's a huge asymmetry, right? In that every day more people, you can't become unvaccinated. Every day more people are vaccinated. And the more people that become that, the harder it is for other people to not. And you don't switch from being unvaccinated or from vaccinated to unvaccinated. Now, someone could say there's an exception if we start having all these booster requirements, something like that, but we're not there yet. And so the pressure for people who are like, I've already had COVID, why should I do this? Like, I just on principle, like my buddy who works at the hospital, he's like, I have a medical reason, but I also just on general principle, I'm not going to comply with this. It's going to get harder and harder. So my point is that I'm conceptualizing it between Sowell's example of, under apartheid and under Jim Crow, there are people who are like, this just isn't sustainable. It's not viable. And whereas in this situation, more and more people are going to be like, just do it, man. It's going to get harder for the holdouts, I guess, is my point. There's an asymmetry there. So, so those are the two things that are in my head, and we can go topic by topic, but I don't know if you guys had any thoughts on anything I just said before going to maybe some of these specific scenarios. But those are the two of the main things that are kind of in my head as I'm conceptualizing it for future stuff, for how I'm thinking about how this might play out. Sorry, go on, Karlyn.
One of the things that I've been thinking a lot about is, looking at Australia, how far do people have to be pushed before they ultimately start fighting back? Question. And I think that part of the problem is that, I frankly think it's incredibly sad that we are not yet at a point in the United States of America where more people are not fighting back against this. I think it's incredibly sad. Now, I believe
demoralizing too. To be honest.
Well, no, it really is. And it's like, I think vaccination should be a choice. I'm toying with the idea of getting vaccinated just because I want to go to England. and I don't want to have to sit in quarantine. I'm not afraid of the Johnson & Johnson. But like, I also don't think it should be mandated. I think it should be a choice for everyone. I think this entire reality is nonsense. And it's been really striking to me, frankly, how many people on the political right who have screamed freedom and liberty and all of these things are taking absolutely no responsibility for pushing back against blatant authoritarianism by their own government now that it's happening right in front of them. So the question for me is, how far does it have to go? How far do these people have to be pushed? Because
what's the breaking point?
I was pushed past my breaking point a long time ago.
What was it? You care to like share that?
Well, I think my breaking point came when I mean, honestly, it came in 2020 with the CRT stuff.
Okay.
Honestly, when we had, state governments, corporations, all of this stuff started pushing this woke training into organizations, teaching people that they're racist because of how they were born. That was my breaking point. That's the point where I said, no, this is not okay. This is not acceptable. Now, granted that my breaking point came a lot sooner than a lot of other people, but I think that it's not as though it's not as though I was the only one that could see that this was only the first step towards something else. You two saw that it was the first step towards something else. Like a whole bunch of people did. And it's like, I think there's still so many people who are still, they're still not able to, I don't know how this is happening. How is it possible that there are so many anti-woke people or anti-CRT people that are honestly not able to conceptualize that what is going on with the vaccines is exactly the same thing as what was going on with what was and still is going on with critical race theory. Keep
going down that.
No, but all of this is coming from the same place. So this is all
I know. I'm saying explain that for people who might say, what's the connection?
Every single bit of this is a part of a larger cultural revolution where they're trying to make society more obedient and subservient to the whim of like the establishment or the elite or whatever you want to call it. They're training people to take orders. They're training people to keep their mouth shut and just comply. And every single part of this, from critical race theory in the schools to vaccine mandates to pressuring employers to fire people who aren't complying, all of to racism as a public health crisis. Have you guys noticed that racism is no longer a public health crisis now?
Right.
It was the worst public health crisis ever in the history of public health crises last summer. And that was how they justified every single giant Black Lives Matter march, was that racism was a public health crisis. Guess what? Racism as a public health crisis has now been usurped by the unvaccinated as a public health crisis. So apparently we cured racism. Congratulations to us.
That's exciting. Yeah.
You can breathe in all that racism. So.
Exactly. But it's like, I don't know how people can't see that these are all the same thing. They're all part of the same thing. And this is what James Lindsay is like beating the drum about so much, is like, this is about a Marxist revolution. That is what this is.
They're the mass lines of action. That's what I asked him in the interview. I'm like, COVID has jumped way ahead. And he's like, these are called mass lines of action. They try something here. And if it's successful, great. If not, they go to a different thing. And then when some maybe catalyzing event takes place, they have all these things basically ready to go, queued up, and they have people kind of like, they never go backwards. What will happen is that if it loses interest, there's people in those respective areas that are just kind of treading water in a holding pattern until something happens, and then they can try that again. But yeah.
Or they just change the topic. It's going to be climate change next. Climate change is on deck.
Right. Yeah. Climate change. I think. Yeah. So here's my quote. I will say that of the conservative, like you were talking about, the people that beat the drum for freedom and liberty, I've grown in very, very cold towards a lot of the Daily Wire crew, but they have done a good job of saying, we're not going to comply with this. This stuff is authoritarian. Now, Ben Shapiro talks out of both sides of his mouth. And I think that's the lawyer in him, where he's like, he said that he has personally evangelized to 100 different people to try and convince them to get vaccinated, presumably regardless of the situation. But despite that, they're saying we're not going to comply. So fair enough. Good on them for that. Credit where credit's due. So let's just take like the first situation. Let's say, and again, I don't expect you guys to have the answers any more than I don't have the answers, but for people who are just thinking through this situation and maybe even just feel like they're alone, I think that's probably a big part of this, is that these people are, maybe it's just them or them and their spouse, and they think that they're alone and they're going to have to deal with this and they don't know what to do. So let's take my friend who's in the works in San Francisco at the hospital, and he got his religious exemption approved, but he doesn't know how long it's going to last. And him and his wife, they were looking at moving, and then they were maybe the recall, and then, we did get our religious exemptions, but then the recall didn't pan out, and we don't know how long it's going to last. As I was preparing for this, I saw that the number 1 draft pick, Andrew, what's his name? He plays for Golden State. His religious exemption for, I'll get his name. Are
you talking about Australia?
NBA, bro.
The guy. Well, yeah, but you said Andrew. I know Andrew Bogut is
Andrew Wiggins.
How can religious exemption expire? Like, are they all of a sudden like not part of the religion?
He never had it approved. It was never even approved. They denied it, and so because of San Francisco's mandates, he can't play any home games. He can play away games, but he can't play home games. P.S. San Francisco. Wow. That's where my buddy's a nurse, and so like, we're seeing this, and I've seen multiple like op-eds and stuff. My buddy was trying to send me stuff about the EEOC and how they have to abide by this. And I went through that NBC article and made a whole thread about it, about religious exemptions. And I'm like, the precedent, the legal precedent is not on the side of those who are seeking this. It's not sustainable. And so what do you guys think about just the people who are in that situation? Like my friend, let's just talk about medical professionals for the time being. Let's keep it isolated to that. Who maybe got a religious exemption approved, or they're waiting for it. Like, what do you think those people should do? How should they be conceptualizing this? And think about it in terms of, have they had COVID? If you have versus haven't, are you high risk, low risk? I think a female versus male is a big factor here, because of where these lipids and spike proteins are congregating in the ovaries. Like, that's not an issue for dudes that we see. But it's screwing with women a lot more than men. Just like, I'm just trying to make, I know, again, I'll end it here. I don't have answers. I have thoughts, but people are feeling alone and going, what do I do? And there are literally millions of people in these situations we're talking about right now. The mandates that our benevolent president rolled out the other week, where they're going to exploit OSHA, and they're doing it with the Department of Education as well. They said this is going to impact 100 million people. So like, this just seems like the need of the hour. The question on people's minds is like, what am I going to do here? So let's just talk about medical professionals for right now. What do you guys think in terms of like, how should they be thinking about it? How should they be weighing it? What would you do if you were in that situation? Just what are your guys' thoughts on that?
Yeah, I can't. No. Well, I've never been in technically I've been in the medical profession, but not as a professional, someone who wants to keep my career path there. So that's the hardest part about it, is you build a career towards something, and to ditch that something so quickly is unfortunate, especially when you have to go through schooling and spend all that money in order to get to that point. But I can say in my own profession, if I was forced to do something or coerced to do something or lose my job, I would go with losing the job. I mean, it's unfortunate. And I think you kind of brought up a really interesting part, the Thomas Sowell, that eventually these things start to fall over, because you're going to have like this market switch where it's like, all right, now we're already short on nurses. What happens when you lose 20% of them? Let's just guess 20%. Sure. And now that's a huge hole that needs to be filled. It will get filled. Will it legally get filled? Who knows, right?
That's the question.
But it's going to get filled somehow.
Yeah.
Unless you have a full national takeover of healthcare, which is its own thing. But even in that instance, you'd still have to fill it somehow. So I do think you'd be able to exit that field try to find something that's close to it, similar to it in some capacity, and always build your career toward whatever you're interested in. But that interest includes your ability to live your life the way you see fit. So you have to add that to the math and exit it if it's something you're not willing to do. And I know that's a hard decision to make, and people are, especially young families, that's really hard to make that, man. When you're like, I this is my livelihood, this is how I support my children, or even my family, my wife, my husband. That's a really hard decision to make, but it's something you have to make. You have to stick to your convictions.
Yep.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. And I think that, inaction has consequences. We can talk about actions having consequences, but inaction has consequences as well. So going back to saying, when I was saying a year and a half ago, start building your business, start building your side hustle, stop relying on people. Well, if you didn't take those actions, and I think medical professionals, frankly, are very capable of taking these actions, just like anyone else is, then now you're in a position where you're kind of like in a shit or get off the pot moment. And you really have two choices. You can bend the knee. I mean, one of the things we say about fighting back against the woke is you never bend the knee, right? Well, I mean, this is exactly the same thing, because we have to view them as completely overlapped. It is the same goal for everything. So if you're not bending in the knee to the woke left when they're demanding you say something is racist, you don't bend the knee here either. And so if you agree that we are going to win nothing if you bend the knee and comply, then quit. It's time to quit. Go start your own practice. Go get together with all of the doctors and the nurses in your area that feel exactly the same way you do. And I bet people who are doctors and nurses already are connected with doctors and nurses in their area that feel exactly the same way they do. And go start your own practice. And go start helping people that are in exactly the same position. Provide them. I've heard of so many doctors who are doing things out of their basement in secret, in the cover of night.
Really?
Yes.
Go on.
Michael Heiss, who is the founder of the Mises Caucus in the Libertarian Party, he posted on Facebook just the other day that he and a whole bunch of other people went to meet with a doctor who was treating people out of his basement.
Wow.
Because prescribing them the forbidden medicine that begins with the I, that I'm not going to say the name of because I don't want to get us in trouble. Yeah, exactly. Giving them what they needed, or the other one, the one that Trump liked.
Oh yeah.
There are people that are doing this, and the basement was completely full with people looking for it because they couldn't get it anywhere else. And so there is a desire and a market for your services, but you have to go and frankly create the mechanism by which people can access them, and just tell the government to go screw. I mean, I quite frankly am shocked that there's not a giant pool of conservative or libertarian lawyers who are just taking on cases on this issue, and they're just suing. Where are the lawsuits? When are people going to start suing over this? Because this is a monumental overreach on all different levels. And why isn't there just a group of lawyers somewhere that are just salivating over being able to sue the government over these cases? That's what
they tried with the college stuff. The college stuff is where they tried, and I think it was at Indiana, and they failed. They lost the case. I think you and I talked about that in our last episode, actually. So
try again.
Right.
Get back on the horse.
Precedent is an issue there, but you're not wrong. Yeah, I think personally, the way I'm thinking about it, it'd be unfair for me to ask you guys what you think. The way I'm thinking about it with the medical professionals is and what's so unfortunate here is if you depoliticize this, let's say we depoliticize it and we say it's not tied with anything that involves bad actors, that involves ulterior motives. I don't think there's any of us, I'd say James included, sorry, James, speaking for you, who would say yeah, if you haven't had COVID and you're 46 and, you're in okay shape, but not in the best shape, and you are a nurse somewhere, get the vaccine, man. Just duh.
The J&J.
Yeah, the Johnson & Johnson, probably.
The people who put asbestos in that baby powder. You're gonna trust
Right.
them?
Yeah.
Okay.
That was what Eric Weinstein said as a side note. He goes, I don't trust Johnson & Johnson, but that's
the last one. I mean, I don't know how much choice you get. I think I got the whoever made Viagra. That one had some weird side effects, but
the irony of it though is, so they were all ragging on the government was like ragging on the reason I started looking at the J&J. I was like, the government doesn't want me to take the J&J. They want me to take the other one. And so I was like, what's going on? But then once all these breakthrough cases started happening, so the original reason the government said not to take the J&J was because it was significantly less effective than the other two. But turns out with all these breakthrough cases, the effectiveness of the J&J has stayed solid.
Yep.
Pfizer and Moderna have plummeted.
And that's the thing that I really am trying to hold in tension here. I do genuinely try to be self-critical, and like remain cognizant of these things. And it's like, are there risks here? Yeah. Are there things that scare the shit out of me? Yeah. How much of it? But I have to ask, how much of this is the institutions have fucked this up so bad and are lying to us? They are corrupt. They are clearly pushing an agenda over science or health or efficacy. How much of it is that, and how much of it is like the vaccines themselves? Because like you said, I think the Johnson & Johnson ones, those were the ones that the Brett and Heather were on board with. Like, it's not like all of a sudden, like, do we have examples of modern medicine shitting the bed? Yeah. Is it that common these days? Not really. Like, the odds of you getting this and it being fine, I think, are higher than the odds of you getting the vaccine and it not being fine. I do mean that, but it's the politicization of it, and the fact that getting it a lot of times represents, I think, Karlyn, you're exactly right, a saying yes to the status quo, yes to compliance, and you're also, by doing it, I think you're making it easier for them to continue to force this on people who are like, no, man, like people like my friend, people like our friend who's in our community. And like, there's something there that has tainted this situation. And maybe this, that's just the institutional rot. And we've talked about that and we don't need to get into it, but there is a tension there that makes it more, as Norm Macdonald would say, it's a thorny issue. It's a thorny issue that makes it harder to navigate. But there's that. So let's go past. Actually, I want to address something you said, Karlyn, and then I want to go to a different domain than medical professionals. One is, you were talking about the side hustle thing, and losing my job from the school district, it sucks. I've told you, I know I've told you, Kevin, but Karlyn, I since I lost my health insurance, like I got on ADHD meds about 3 or 4 years ago, and it's a night and day difference. I don't know how I lived without it, but like, I've been off my ADHD medicine and it sucks ass.
I'm sorry.
But there have been benefits of like, they're not having to work. Like, I've been able to do these side jobs. I do have a skill set. I don't like doing manual labor, but I can do manual labor, and I'm good at like painting and specific like craft work like that. And I've been able to get jobs doing that where I don't have to worry about any of that stuff. At the same time, as I'm applying for jobs, I'm like thinking, are they going to make me get a vaccine if I work for it? Now, one of the ones I applied for was the post office, which they don't, by the way, that application process is hilarious. There's like a 50 questionnaire you have to go through that's like scenarios, and it's like you have 4 options, and what are you most likely to do and what are you least likely to do. And I shit you not, half the questions boil down to, will you help out your incompetent coworker? Like, dead serious. Like, it's like, that's seriously that. Like, it's funny. It's so funny.
The worst part is you had to mail the application in.
Oh yeah, exactly. That was all these online. But I am having to think about, like, are they going to have this as a requirement? Now, where I live, I'm not as worried about that. But there is something to that side hustle thing that you're talking about there, Karlyn, and I'm going back through all of Nassim Taleb's books. And one of the things he mentioned was, like, he said, prior to the 2008, and this is in the Black Swan, he said, if you were a day trader who moonlit as a belly dancer, you're more robust to a big blow up than someone who's just a day trader, because you have something else that you can do. So there is a robustness there that we've kind of lost sight of. That's just not part of how we think about things. I don't think it's necessarily a flaw on people's parts. It is, but I don't know how much it's like, it's just not part of what's ingrained in us, unfortunately. But you're right that people do have to become robust to these things and get some degree of autonomy. My thought on the medical stuff is exactly what you said, Karlyn, and I agree with you as well, Kevin, where it's like people have to make these decisions personally. I think there are some people, sadly, and I know this is probably not the popular thing to say, where I think it does make sense for them to get it. I think if you work at a nursing home and you haven't had COVID and they're saying, hey, you need to get this vaccine, I think you need to do your homework on which one you want to do, as we've talked about here. But I don't think I think it actually makes sense in some of these situations. I don't want to let the politicization of it cloud my general judgment and assessment of the overall situation. So Karlyn, looked like you wanted to say something there, but
yeah, I mean, I think that it's a tough spot, man. And I've been talking to more and more people who have like gotten now like the letter from their employer saying, if you're not vaccinated by X date, you will be terminated.
Yep.
I'm not going to lie. It's a really tough position to be in. And yeah. I don't begrudge people getting the vaccine to keep their job.
Yep.
I just don't. But I do think that people need to be honest with themselves about what that means. It means you've bent the knee to them, and you're setting the stage for what if they ask you to do what's the next thing they're going to ask you to do? What's the next thing after that? What's the next thing after that? And that kind of brings me back to my original question, which is, how far do people have to be pushed?
Yep.
If your employer tells you that you have to lock yourself in your house and you can't leave because you might spread the virus to someone else, even after you've already taken the employer mandated vaccine, are you going to do that? If your employer tells you that not only do you have to stay locked in your house, but they will deliver you the food that you will eat while you are locked in your house, which is, by the way, literally what happens when you have to go into quarantine in like the UK and Canada.
That's what's going on in Australia. The cops are showing up at people's. I watched a live stream yesterday where Boyce and Lindsay were talking, and Mike Nana, the guy who filmed who did the Evergreen documentary, excellent documentarian, Mike Nana, and he said that because he was exposed to COVID and he's supposed to be quarantining, the police are showing up at his house at 6 a.m. and flipping on and like whoop whoop, just to make sure he's there. This is house arrest. This is crazy. So you're not wrong. And by the way, how far removed are we from that? I don't know. Because just to go on a brief tangent, that will happen anywhere that you have politicians who have the balls to do it and a populace that lacks the spine to say no. There's a reason why even in Canada, things have gotten bad. Samuel Say was having a hell of a time. It took him a year to even get out of the country. In Ontario, that, by the way, that batshit country just reelected Trudeau. But I think it was in Ontario that the police could stop you just to ask you why you're out of your house. And think about why things are the way they are in San Francisco or New York or whatever. Like, this is going to happen. This is happening here. It's going to continue to happen here. And so I did a live stream about this where I talked about World War Z, where I'm like, there are all these people who are in this book where they were like not worried about the zombies because they just kept hearing about it on the news and there was never any zombies around them. And then they took it seriously when a fucking zombie showed up at their house and like, oh, it's here. And I'm really worried about the amount of people that have that with like about authoritarianism, where to them it's this abstract, far off, distant idea. Whereas like what you're saying, Karlyn, is like, no, it's not that distant.
Right.
We're not that far removed from it. And it's actually like, my buddy, when I was talking to him about this one in San Francisco, he's like EEOC. And I said, those are only as strong as the willingness of people to enforce them, man. Like, are you really going to put your hope? Like I said, do you know who runs the EEOC? That's a federal agency, bro. You're going to put your hope in that. That's the one that's not compromised. All the rest of them are, but that's the one you're going to trust. He's like, oh shit, you know? But you're not wrong. And people do have to think about that. I do want to ask a question based on something that you just said. Is there a way for people to do it? So I see these masks that say this doesn't do anything, or this is useless,
right?
Or something like that. Is there a way for people to get vaccinated so that they don't like jeopardize their family? And again, I don't, people are going to be like, oh, Truman's just wanting to compromise or something. But as we've mentioned, like I do think there is, I'm sorry that I think there are situations where it's makes sense. We have required there again, it's been overly politicized, but we do have precedent for people being required to get vaccinated for things. You know, we just do. They're not wrong about that. This is a different situation because these are still experimental. We have the emergency use authorization. How much do we trust FDA's approval, you know, for Pfizer, all of that stuff. Okay, fair enough. Even with that, I do think there are situations where it makes sense. Like I wish my mom would. My mom is in her late 60s. She smoked most of her life. Like just fucking get it. Like the benefits outweigh the risk for her. I'm not worried about, you know, her fertility, you know, as I would for someone, you know, who is your age, Karlyn, you know, like I'm just not worried about that. And so that's what I mean is that with that in place, sorry, I started to lose my track. Okay. Are there ways for people to still, even if it is kind of bending the knee, to do that and still have some form of civil obedience? Is there a way that it's like, you know, you're doing it as a way of sticking around in these places to push back? You know, can we at least allow for, there are situations where it makes sense for people to do it? And I know that there are people who, you know, who will trick themselves into saying, I had to do it for this or this reason. The reality is in some cases they're right. And in some cases they're just deceiving themselves.
I would argue.
So what do you guys think about that?
Just deceiving themselves, to be honest.
Say again.
I would argue in most cases when they're doing that, they're just deceiving themselves. They're trying to make themselves feel better about the decision that they made. Now, again, I don't begrudge anyone getting the vaccine to keep their jobs, because I understand it is a really tough position to be in. And I don't want to gloss over that. It is extraordinarily hard. I don't know what I would do. Okay. If I reported to someone else, I truly do not know what I would do. And I'm someone saying, I'm going to get the vaccine just to go on a gallivant off to England for a couple of days, you know, so I get it. But I do think that people need to be honest about what they're doing. I may get the vaccine to go to a foreign country that won't allow me in unless I have the vaccine. However, I'm not going to comply with any of these. I'm still not going to like go along with these effing mandates. I think it's stupid. I'm not going to patronize stores that are not going to service unvaccinated people. Yep. I'm still going to fight back like hell against the mandates, because I made a choice. If I get the vaccine, I made a choice.
Have you had COVID?
I don't know. Honestly, I've never had an antibodies test. I think I did. I think I had it in the very beginning. I just haven't. Victor and I talk about this all the time. We need to get an antibodies test because we think we both had it at the very beginning. But no, I mean, I think if people are making a choice to get it that's not being forced upon them, that is a different topic. And I think if people make the choice purely because of an employer mandate or a government mandate, then there are other ways that they can push back and speak out about it. And I think that if they just get the vaccine and everything's fine and they're like, okay, I complied and I can go back to my normal life now, and they don't continue to speak out and to fight back against this, then they've done exactly what the government wants them to do.
Yeah.
So I will judge their actions a lot less harshly if they are consistent in their principles. But if they are not consistent in their principles, I'm going to say you did the path of least resistance and you have set the rest of us up, and you know what, we're not on the same effing team. Sorry.
Yep.
Yeah, I think so like when you, Truman, keep saying, oh, I'm sorry, but I think it makes sense, I don't think you have to apologize. I think vaccine science might be the greatest human invention of all time. Well, the second greatest
Definitely
human invention of all. Second greatest behind freedom, which should tell you what you should put precedence in front of what. like you can't just be coerced into doing all this and expect you to maintain some sort of superiority of yourself as an individual making choices, right? We reviewed Hayek for the longest time, and Hayek talks about it's your F.A. Hayek, I think Frankie something Hayek, I don't know, he's a guy. Read the book, Road to Serfdom. It's okay.
It's a decent
it's decent. Or you can listen to like 40 hours of commentary from us, or
I got a story to tell you whenever we're done recording, by the way.
Time with that book, my God.
We're not done yet.
Oh, Jesus
so we still have
Christ.
one more chapter to go and another episode after that to go.
Yep.
But to Karlyn's point, I think that's how you have to go about it. I as much as I would like to say, because I have never been put in this position either, although I already got vaccinated, I would also have never been demanded to get vaccinated either. No. And being put in that position, I'm there with Karlyn. If you make that decision because you want to maintain your career, I'm not going to think you're a coward for doing that. But you can't, when they come out with the next booster and then the next booster and then the next mandate, at some point you're going to have to say no. And if you find yourself being that person who doesn't say no ever, there's a kind of a good analog to this. I don't know if you guys watch Brooklyn Nine-Nine. There's the police chief is a black gay man, and he keeps going up the ranks. And he keeps kind of keeping his mouth shut because, he was a detective a long time ago and he was discriminated against, but he kept his mouth shut to keep going up because he said, the higher up I go, the more control I have over this to stop this discrimination from happening. And then he was hit with a moment that it was happening to him with another black officer. And he's like, he told the black officer, just keep your mouth shut. And then one of the, I think Jake Peralta in there said, well, you're in this position. At some point, you have to use this position to what you originally wanted to use it for, to affect change. And if you just say, no, I'm just going to maintain this position so I have greater power to affect change, if you never end up affecting change, then what's the point? At some point, you have to stick to your principles, even if you have to give in a little bit here and there. Yeah. At some point, no means no, and you have to stand up for what you believe in. And you have to, stand up for what you believe in, or exit the field, even though it's a field you might love to do. It doesn't make sense to keep, that I don't know if bending the knee is the right word, but if you keep doing that and say, well, my real principles are this, but I have to do this momentarily. If you keep making that decision, then you don't have any principles.
I do think bending the knee is the right word. The question, because anytime when I go to work on time, I'm bending the knee, right? There are lots of times, like part of the society we live in is that we engage in voluntary restrictions on our freedom as an exchange. I have to be there at a certain time. I have to be there for a certain length of time. Dude, if you think about the restrictions you have for employment, when you show up at a place, you can only eat at certain times you know what I mean? And so on paper, that sounds a lot like bending the knee, but it's voluntary.
I would disagree with that.
It's voluntary. It's voluntary.
You're also being compensated.
Totally. All I'm saying, the only thing, let me just be really specific. All I'm saying is that there are times that we voluntarily give up our freedom and autonomy because we think it's a good deal for us in the long run. That's all I'm saying. And this is a normal thing that we do.
I think to specify that out a little bit it's one of those things, again, to go back to Hayek, know the rules of the game before you enter the game. If the rules change while you're in the game, call BS. That's
a different situation because you didn't agree to that. Because
exactly. So if I'm already employed and then I'm forced on this, okay, you're changing the rules of the game pretty late right now.
Yes.
And this is BS. If I'm applying for a job and they say you have to get vaccinated, well, then you have a lot less to complain about. I still think you should complain, but you have a lot less to complain about because then you've really be giving up your principles. Like, I'm going to take this job and get a vaccine, even though I don't want to.
Totally. Yeah, no, I totally agree. Again, that's not me saying that those are good things. I'm just saying that we have to, we have to fight to separate this specific thing, even though it is incredibly unique, from like prior precedent. Either the left will make bad faith arguments of prior precedent. Just because they do doesn't mean that we can't say, look, like we are responsible enough to have that conversation. They're not. We can say, hey guys, there is prior precedent. We have to think about this. What do you guys think about there is something, and Karlyn, I think it was you. It was either it obviously was either you or Kevin, because you're the only
Could have been
two
James
people here that I'm talking to, besides the other voices.
The
but
ghost of James.
the ghost of James.
The voice is coming out of the toilet.
I should have worn just a batshit ugly shirt. Just
don't you have a Chiefs shirt on? So I think.
Come on, man. Come on, man. I actually was putting this shirt on, and I was like, I bet you if you were to do a statistical analysis of my outfits and videos, hands down, this is the most common shirt that I wear in videos.
Only knew it was a Chiefs shirt because
true.
I could see like maybe it looked like a C, and I'm like, yeah, good enough. I know what it is.
Yeah, my wife got me this a long time ago. It's my favorite Chief shirt, despite having many.
The shirt's not a problem. It's the Care Bear underwear that you're wearing right now. It's disturbing. But
well, you asked for the picks. You wouldn't know otherwise. And by the way,
boys, let's relax. We don't need to get into a pissing contest.
What?
Oh my God.
Anyway, okay. So is there something, one of you guys said something about where are the limits? When do you say enough is enough? Is there something, because I can say with confidence that like I have enough banked instances of where I have said, no, fuck off. I mean, I lost my job because I was like, no, this is what's right. I'm going to do what's right. I have put my money where my mouth is, quite literally. And that's not the only time I've done that. But is there something about where I think that there are most people, sorry, I'm formulating this. I'm externally processing, but I think this is useful for anyone who's still watching this or listening, that most people aren't put in those situations to take a stand, I guess, about stuff. Most people aren't in socially. Here's an example. Okay. So I've talked about this in when I've talked about the stuff with my job specifically, but this is the best example I can give. So there was a person that I worked with at the school who was not just competent, but a really genuinely good person. She didn't just care about the kids, as many people can say, but she was really good at her job, competent, character, high levels of character. But she had not been tested when it came to having your back against the wall about these issues that I dealt with in the school, with the school district. People can watch prior videos if you don't know what I'm talking about. And this is a person who at first was like willing to kind of a little bit, it didn't have a lot of spine to speak out, even though there's illegal stuff happening. Even though she was documenting all this stuff, which was crazy. She had more documentation of illegal stuff than I even had, but was very hesitant to file any complaints. And she did. And then they retaliated against the behavioral psychologist I work with, and she tapped out. She was like, I'm not going to do this. She even requested a transfer from the school, the building that I was at, up to work at the high school with one of the worst people, who she was like, this is the worst. This person was so bad that this competent teacher had to shut her phone off at a certain time every night, because this crazy woman would call her every night.
Wow.
Like wanting validation and stuff. But she literally told me, she's like, I don't think I can deal with the stress, is how she worded it, of just those adversarial interactions with the principal and with the system and whatever. And I have mentioned this before, but I'll say it again, is that I had told her before I knew that she'd requested a transfer, I said, you need to decide what kind of teacher you want to be. Because this was her first year. She was older. She's older than I am. She was close to 40. And she had just gotten into teaching because she had been raising her kids and stuff. And I said, this is your first year. You need to decide what kind of teacher you want to be. You're either going to be someone who goes all out, or just goes with the program, or tries to do something in between where you maybe just do what you can in your classroom. You have to decide. And ultimately she made that decision. She requested the transfer and did that. My point is that someone like that, who has impeccable character, outside of, if you were going to say courage as part of character, then I would say obviously that's a deficit. But anything else, I would attest to the character and the principles and the integrity and the just competence of this person, but she'd never been tested. And so whenever she faced a little bit of stress, she was like, I can't do it. So is there something about this situation where most people, even if they're decent people who have the right ideas, but who they haven't been tested, if you don't have a track record of building that kind of that steel spined thing, of building that, like, you know, compromise breeds compromise, discipline breeds discipline. If you're a person who's never had to actually take a stand and test yourself, that's that Mike Tyson quote, everyone has a plan till they get punched in the face. If you're a person who's never been punched in the face with these situations, where maybe we're so softened that even people like that, you know, they haven't been in that situation. So it's really hard for a lot of these people who would maybe otherwise in a different era, under different circumstances, it'd be easy for them, but things are so fucking easy generally in life. Does that make sense? Like that people just haven't been able to cultivate that kind of thing.
Okay. I think I understand what you're getting at. And I think part of the problem is, again, I don't want to blame conservatives and the political right for everything, but
I'm okay with you doing that in this situation.
But
fine.
But the thing is so this cultural revolution has been going on. The left has been pushing this for at least minimally 40 to 50 years. Right? Can we agree on that?
Longer.
Oh yeah.
I would
Like
say
I
longer,
think it's probably,
yeah.
I think we could probably make the argument for longer, but 40 to 50 years. Right.
Yeah.
So what a lot of people on the political right don't understand, because they kind of say like, we're the free thinkers. We look at the facts. We look at all the information. We know what's really going on. We are not fooled by the leftist media. They do not understand that the same system that has built this entire generation of people that just are completely devoid of personal resiliency and personal responsibility at all. This movement weaponizing the youth of the country that has created this woke left in the first place, the thing that they put on the news that they make fun of all the time. What they don't realize is that most of them have gone through exactly the same system. And so just because you can pick out some parts of what like the woke left is doing and say, you know, they're crazy for reason X, Y, B, and Z, and I'm the red pilled one and I can show you the real information, it doesn't mean that they have not, you know, frankly, they haven't been challenged in a way to build up their own personal resiliency in some respects. So if we're talking about why the population doesn't have a spine in order to stand up to the government and say, no, we are not going to comply with your authoritarian edicts, it's because they've been through precisely the same system that produced the woke left. Now, it may have had a different impact on them, because no system is perfect. No system is going to impact every person in the same way. They probably came from conservative families. They had these values instilled in a different way. So we can go back and look at maybe like what values did they have instilled on them in other parts of their life that allowed them to not be susceptible to the woke left. But that doesn't mean that they've ever been put in a position where they've had to actually really develop resiliency, because they came up, a lot of them, in the same environment. So I'm not actually surprised at all that we aren't seeing people stand up. And it is actually more of a problem when this happens on the right, simply because like they think that they are the ones with a spine. They think that they are the ones that see facts over feelings. I have never seen whining like I've seen on the political right. If this is the population that honestly believes they're the ones that are putting feelings or facts over feelings, I'm sorry, a lot of them never really learned how to put feelings over facts. And it's easy to say facts don't care about your feelings when Donald Trump is in office. Yeah. And the Republicans control everything. It's very easy to say facts don't care about your feelings then. It's a lot harder to say it when your political enemies control everything. And so I think what we've seen since the inauguration is, you know, a lot of people on the political right turned out to be exactly like the enemy they were fighting on the political left. And that's entirely because they all went up through the same system. The only reason we didn't see it earlier is because their tribe was in power, and so they were happy. So we didn't see that side of them. And so are they going to stand up now? Probably not, because they never had to learn how to. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. That's my position at the moment. I could be convinced otherwise.
I have a thought, Kevin. I'm sure you got something there. Go for it.
Well, I think there's a lot. I agree with the wider idea of the more conservative side not fulfilling their duty. And I think it goes in a little bit how I would answer Truman's question is the people who've never been tested. There's just a lot of people who don't know how to speak out. And I have firsthand experience that I've documented this when I tried to stand up against the school district's push.
Tell that story really fast.
To start out, I relate this COVID stuff directly with the CRT stuff like Karlyn did before. It's the same thing, not being able to speak up for CRT. You can't expect people to speak out over COVID either. But
can I interject one thing, just one thing? Yeah. And I know this is something that I articulated earlier, but I want to put a fine point on this. They're the same in practice. They're different in principle.
Yeah.
CRT is evil and toxic, and there is nothing redeemable about CRT. Okay. Because it toxifies and twists things that you would like. All the redeemable things, those are the Mott. Okay. CRT is all Bailey. Whereas this stuff with COVID, like I said earlier, under normal circumstances in a not so batshit crazy timeline, it would not be like this. It's only the same because of where we are in history and where we are socially. Outside of that, I think it's not. It's the same because the left has perverted it. CRT was perverted from the beginning. This COVID stuff would not be perverted if we didn't have complete institutional capture of these things. So I just want to make that distinction. Can we at least agree on that? That they are the same only because of what the left has done. If we weren't in this batshit crazy timeline, they wouldn't be the same.
I think I agree with you in principle. I think I do.
I would frame this as an Eric Hoffer. They're building a mass movement. These are tools in that mass movement. And so when you talk about, when you're saying before that, all right, well, now it's the vaccinated and now it's the people who are vaccinated, but or won't accept the booster or won't accept, like they're trying to create a more specific out group, and they're almost building like an intersectionality of these out groups, like people who don't believe in CRT, people don't believe in COVID, people don't believe in masking, all these people don't believe in climate change, whatever. It's this intersectional coalition of the deplorables, we can call them. I mean, they're building that out group, and they're trying to pin all these different things on them to make them evil. And I think, when you put that in terms of Eric Hoffer creating that out group, but
conservatism.
To get back to what I was talking about with my personal experience in this, when I was pushing back against my daughter's school district and this group that kind of came in to do the diversity training stuff, and they tried to basically go down the Ibram Kendi path, and I was in on the call, and I'm the only one who spoke out, and I did it as politely as possible. And I interjected, and what I always try to do is, instead of just throwing my ideas in there, I ask probing questions of them to figure out why they think they do what they do, in order for them to ask me the same question, so then I can tell them why I think the way I think. So I did it that way, and I probed in there far enough to know that these people never read Kendi. These people never read any of these CRT folks. And I clearly knew, it's like, I can give you all the information you think you know, because I've read the book. I was dumb enough to do a full, length review of the book, and I'm still recovering from all those dead brain cells. And to know, I'm like, I know more about this than you do. Was in, like, I don't know if enlightening is the right word, but it was like profound. I'm like, wow, this is not good. And when I pushed back on them, all they had to do was like, I'll get back to you later. Let me talk to some other anonymous person out here who's more the expert on this stuff. But after that call, I had several people reach out to me. I'm like, I think the exact same things you do. I just don't know how to articulate it. I don't know how to speak out. I can't accuse them of not being courageous enough. It's just more of they never been tested. They don't understand how to speak out. And there's different ways that you can activate those people. I think part of it is motivating them to speak out. I think a lot of people are trying to do their best, and all these people who are speaking up at these school board meetings, like the regular people, not Matt Walsh's, like the everyday parents,
Karlyn's BFF.
The everyday parents who do this, because that'll motivate the people who don't know how to speak out, being like, this is an everyday person. This is not a talking head on the internet or on TV that's doing this. This makes me believe that I can do this. And some people just need to be pushed. It's like, okay, like, these things, just go out there and just hop on a phone call and just ask probing questions. You just got to push them out there. And then some people honestly just kind of need to be scolded into it, like grow a pair and speak up. This stuff. show them, this stuff and push back, because as you're not pushing back, your kids are being corrupted or your community is being corrupted, and all these horrible things. Kind of the same thing, not sticking by your principles. It's like, well, you can say you have these principles, but do you really have them if you never stand up for them?
Yeah.
And it's just that empty, it's not an empty promise, but the empty principles to say I'm projecting myself as part of this team until, I'm the light's on me. And then I'm like, all right, I don't know what to say. Like, I'm just here. I'm just listening. I kind of agree.
Oscar, when Michael,
I don't like
brings
racism.
Yeah.
Right. I didn't agree to be here. Get pulled out, and wow, you looked really bad up there. But that's the part of never being tested. And we're never going to get to the point where you're going to have Ben Shapiro speak loud enough to say all of these things are bad. Ben Shapiro only helps in a very, very small capacity. It's the everyday person who needs to stand up and say, we can't have this in our schools. We can't have this in our place of business. We can't have this in our society. We're talking about schools with COVID. We're talking about business with COVID and CRT stuff. We're talking about society. When we get to, I agree with you, the next step is going to be the climate change stuff. All of these things need to be pushed back against, and it's got to come from the everyday people. It cannot just come from the talking heads on the internet and TV.
Yeah. And I want to build off this a little bit, because I completely agree with everything you just said. I think that average people need to start speaking up. If you're not comfortable with public speaking, like, join the club. Most people are not comfortable with public speaking, but like, as Truman always says, like, you don't do things because you don't do it because it's convenient. You do it because it's necessary.
Yep.
Right. And I got to tell you, so I would have a whole lot more respect for Matt Walsh if, instead of doing things like going to Loudoun County, Virginia, and renting a house there so that he can go talk at a school board meeting for likes and clicks on the internet, what if Matt Walsh instead went to Loudoun County, Virginia, and held a workshop with the parents in Loudoun County, Virginia, where he taught them how to give an amazing school board speech. And then he sat there and supported them and cheered them on in the audience when the parents of the students who are actually going to school there got up in the school board meeting and gave an amazing speech that they could only give because someone like Matt Walsh came in and coached them on how to do it and told them on how to do it. Like, I think that the conservatives need to stop waiting for their talking heads to save them. Matt Walsh doesn't give two F's about what's going on in Loudoun County, Virginia, yet he's making a big show of renting.
You think that's true?
There.
You
Yes,
think he genuinely doesn't care? You think that the percentage from a scale of 1 to 100 of his care is 0?
Yes. I do think that, because if Matt Walsh actually genuinely cared, he would be out there helping people to speak for themselves, not taking all the spotlight for himself. He is performing a publicity stunt that is going to
I think he cares, but that he also is the thing that you just said.
Yeah, I wouldn't put it at 0%, but I think what you said right there, Karlyn, is something I didn't think of, as like, hold a workshop and show that you actually want to help people and not just put yourself on camera. Because I do think
he cares, but he cares to the degree also that it can benefit him and his brand.
Yeah. And this is
that's
why
a
I have
really good observation.
Infinitely more respect for Scott Pressler, because Scott Pressler goes around and he does workshops and he teaches people how to register people to vote. Scott Pressler is going around and creating 1 million more Scott Presslers. Right? Matt Walsh is only doing it. So anyway, my point here is that, people need to stop, because I want to just complain about Matt. I could complain about Matt Walsh for days. Obviously, I think
that's the next month.
Ember. That'll be like the next month.
Walsh.
Like I'm gonna bring the top, like, everything that's wrong with Matt Walsh. Go.
I'm gonna white pill you on conservatism when we're done recording, by the way.
Okay, excellent. Well, I can't wait to hear that. But like, conservatives are they're the political movement that believes in personal responsibility, pulling yourself up by your bootstraps. Well, I'm sorry. Stop waiting for your talking heads to save you. Yeah. Go to the school. In fact, I was even thinking about this last night. I was like, I'm going to open up my locals community. I'm going to give a bunch of coupon codes out. I'm going to do just like speech workshop Zoom sessions. Like, if you want to go give a speech at your school board, maybe you've never thought about public speaking in your life, come and join locals. We will do speech workshop sessions in June. I will help you become a good public speaker. I will give you feedback. We can all give each other feedback. Like, God knows I'm not the only one who knows how to give a speech in the world, but like, that's the stuff that we need to be doing. We need to be lifting up everyday people and empowering them to do it themselves and providing them the resources if they are inexperienced or they're nervous or any of these things. And people have to stop. They have to start realizing that their talking heads are not going to save them. Matt Walsh isn't going to save you. You have to save yourself.
I will say, I did a live stream when I was working in Montana about this, because I saw Matt Walsh a video, or I think it's maybe on Twitter, where he was at a school board meeting, and the whole crux of the live stream. By the way, I hear sirens out there.
Oh, good.
And I love that I live in a place that it's weird when I hear sirens. I go, I wonder what's going on, as opposed to somewhere where you just hear sirens all the time. Anyway, but the crux of the live stream was I said, it's actually kind of encouraging that it was weird to see Matt Walsh, because to your point, Karlyn, most of those videos that go viral are normal people.
Yeah.
They are just regular moms. You've interviewed some of them. You've interviewed a lot of these people, actually.
Yeah.
And so that is actually really encouraging to me, that it's not the big name people, but it's regular folks. Lindsay did an Only Subs, I think it was, where it was, if you're a parent, that's all you need to be credentialed to go to these school board meetings and say, I don't have any other expertise I even need to present to be here.
Right.
That's enough. So I will say that I would like to end it on the school stuff. Karlyn, go ahead and say what you want to say, and then I want to talk about some school stuff specifically, but go ahead. I can tell you got something.
No. That was actually all I wanted to say. No, that was all I wanted to say. I'm good.
Okay. Okay. So let's go to because I really want to keep this practical for people. We talked about the medical stuff. People have to make those decisions. I know that's not super useful for some people, but for others, I hope that they go, yeah, there is a math I have to do here. It might make sense. It might not, but look at private practices. I didn't actually get on this maybe 30, 40 minutes ago. I said I wanted to get my thoughts on the medical stuff, and then I didn't. See if there's a private practice you can start. Karlyn, you talked about this of get other people. There's a reason. So people have to listen to these things, by the way. Here's a minor soapbox. People have to actually listen to this stuff themselves, not wait for Ben Shapiro's summary of it.
Yeah.
Listen to Biden's speech, not Biden's, but the speech that Biden gave about the vaccine requirements. They use requirements, not mandates. Kudos to CNN for still using the word mandate, by the way. But where he talked about hospitals, and then he made a specific appeal to private practices. There's a reason for that. Is that private practices can do whatever the fuck they want, with that stuff. And so if you are a medical professional, try to if you can start a private practice, great. If you can go to work for an urgent care, I think urgent care is one of the places where you could see people making a stand on this stuff. I know a lot of these urgent care they're all over, they're national, where you'll have whatever urgent care company has an urgent care in this many places or whatever. So I don't know what their policies are. But I know that there is a lot of urgent cares, and the odds of there being none of them that don't want to comply with this, I think, are zero. So talk to those people. Can you work for an urgent care? Can you work for a private practice? Can you start your own private practice? Do you need 9 credits to be whatever kind of nurse to have your own private practice? You know what I mean?
I think he's brought up a good point. And can I tell you, I've heard of so many people who
Go for
work for urgent care as being subversive. Even if there are rules, if you go,
I'm sure. Yeah. I think that's one of the places where people will do the Thomas Sowell thing I was talking about.
Yeah.
That was one of the places I had in mind where they'll go,
It's just an episode of Scrubs in there.
Exactly.
Here, can I give you guys a TMI medical thing, but from urgent care that supports what you just said, Karlyn?
Remember, we're on the internet, Truman.
Yeah, whatever. So, I get crazy wax in my ears. I don't know why. And I found that
less worse than I thought it was going to be.
Continue. Yeah, no, it's not bad.
If it's wax building up in your ears, you're fine.
That's right. But there's a specific pen lid. This isn't it. That I can literally use this lid of a pen. I used to have to go in. If you've never had your ears irrigated, by the way, you will be astounded, no matter who you are, the amount of shit that they will get out of your ears if they're good at it. But I have this pen lid where I can actually get shit deep in my ear. I shouldn't be fucking around with a pen lid. I can see Karlyn's face.
Do you remember that episode? Have either of you guys watched all the Freddy Krueger movies?
Yeah.
Like
Oh yeah.
So there's one where the nurse goes in with the giant Q-tip. Do you remember? And like that's what that was what was
turns into the claw. Okay.
Yeah.
So no, but like I was at an urgent care and she was like, dude, you don't need these irrigated. Your ears are fine. I've never seen them so clean. And I go, I know you're going to tell me not to do this, but I've literally been using the lid of a pen to clean my ears out. And she goes, if it's working, go for it. Like
I had a doctor. I had a doctor say, never stick anything in your ear that's smaller than your elbow. Basically to say, don't stick stuff in your ear.
Yeah.
Because you could perforate an eardrum.
Right. Yeah. You know, I'm like, sure, there's no cats in here to jump on me or a daughter to jump on me or anything like that. But anyway, to your point, Karlyn, yeah, I think that's one of the places where they're going to be like, you know, whatever. That's where there is. So anyway, my point is that I think there is room for people in the medical field, like my buddy in San Francisco, where I'm like, okay, I don't care. You got basic medical skills, and then you got this hyper specific education. And I know you get paid a lot based on this. You're going to have to rely on this and go somewhere else. It's just like, you know, I know that we've talked about this kind of thing where people have to understand their social landscape is going to change based on a lot of this stuff. You're going to lose friends. It just is. You're going to have social dynamics that are going to change. That includes vocational. And if people do want to stick to their principles, they have to understand the vocational stuff. It's not just the relations at their job, but maybe their job itself. Anyway, so that's my thoughts on the medical stuff. But I do want to end on the education stuff. What do you got? And something kind of tied to it because it's connected to kids. What are your guys' thoughts on one? I know this isn't the education thing, but it's something I mentioned earlier, and I really want to know what you think about it. Starting to talk to call people out. Let's do a call out culture. Let's say call out culture is okay as long as we do it, the right people do it. You know, I'm sure there's no hypocrisy there at all. But if I see it, there was a woman who came up to us. We were at the last farmer's market, and she had a mask on. She's probably 22. We're outside. And she says, hey, we're doing this thing. We want to hear what your favorite thing about farmers markets is. We want to put it on Instagram, whatever. I almost said, I don't talk to people that wear masks outside. Sorry. I didn't do it because my wife was there. My wife, I knew that she would have been like, you fucking, what do you?
Are you going to say your answer is not having to wear a freaking mask?
No. And maybe if I had a little bit more to drink, I would have. But even just whenever I see people, and I mentioned this in a video, I want to say maybe 4 or 5, maybe more months ago, when I see a kid outside, someone who's 3 or 4, you know, and they're wearing a mask, I feel it physically. Because I think about what's this going to do to that kid later. If we fast
I've told you
forward,
issues with my daughter.
Assume we have a country real fast. Assume we have a country in 10 years. What happens to a 6-year-old who's wore a mask for almost 2 years now?
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm just thinking about this stuff future tense. So there's that. So my last two, like I said, it's around schools, and this last question about it's mostly about masks. So what do you think about saying things to people about addressing that issue? Because again, we're talking about what do people practically do? The odds of there being 0 people that are like, holy shit, I want to say something. I don't know if you saw the video of it was like based Asians on Twitter of the woman who ripped all the advertisements off in the subway. Amazing video. I was literally in the car and I go, fuck yeah.
I saw that video
myself.
Yeah, that was awesome.
Like 20 minutes before we started this.
Yeah, it's incredible. But so the question is the first thing is not necessarily school, but with kids in masks, should people be saying something? Should they bring it up? How many fucks should people give at this point? I think is a good question to ask generally, by the way. And I'm not even trying to be sarcastic. I do think that's a worthy question to entertain. But the second thing,
1 to 10 fuck scale? Like what? What's
perhaps? Yeah, sure. We can go 1 to 10.
1.5 fucks. All right.
Yeah, this one goes to 11. But the second thing with schools is like, what do you do whenever it's like they're requiring masks. So here's an example for the district that I'm in. What's weird, dude, the middle school, this is crazy. If you get a parent's signature on a form, the kid doesn't have to wear a mask. Otherwise they do.
Wow.
It's like if this is medical, what are you talking about? But that's how it is at the middle school. And the middle school's fucked anyway. That's where I worked, and it's really bad. But I'm saying, like, what do you do when you're a parent? What happens if you want to watch I know we've talked about this before. Here's a question that, not a prediction, but a question. What happens if when you're a parent and you want to go to your kid's basketball game and they're saying you have to show a negative COVID test or wear a mask to watch your sophomore play basketball? Like, what do you guys think that parents should do in these situations? Or kids, let's say you're 16, you could get the vaccine, but you're like, I don't think I need this, because this is becoming a serious, as if they needed one more thing for there to be social issues and contentions, at middle school and high school level. This is becoming that. So at the middle school here, I'll give you an example. At middle school, the kids that don't wear masks, it has become incredibly segregated. Yeah. If you're part of the group that wears masks, you're over here. If you're part of the group that doesn't, you're over here. And both of them make fun of each other. The kids that don't wear masks are like, what the fuck are you doing? And the kids that do wear masks are like, you're killing grandma. So both of them are doing it. I will say my buddy who is a school psych who worked at a lab school, he said he only observed them picking on the kids that didn't wear it. This is last school year. My wife, who she's in Big Brothers Big Sisters, and her little said that it goes both ways. And I believe that. The odds of the kids who don't wear masks not tossing the shit back is zero, so, but my point is this is creating serious social divisions. So what do you do if you're a parent? How do you advise your kid? These kids, if you're 15, 16, whatever, you can get the vaccine. It's becoming a point of contention. So what do you think about this in schools? And I don't want to fast forward to pull your kids out and homeschool them. I think we probably all agree that's the long-term solution. But that's not a right now answer for a lot of people. So what do they do in the meantime? Just practically, what do you guys think about just the schools? So the first question is, should we start calling people out? Does that become hypocrisy? And then the second one is about schools. Just what are your thoughts on that? Just to try to bring it to a close with something practical.
I don't have any problem with calling people out as long as it's being done for a principled reason. I had a big problem when the right decided to cancel Chrissy Teigen 2 years after something happened. Now, that's not to say that I like Chrissy Teigen. I don't like her at all. That's not to say I like what she did. I think it was awful. I think it was awful when she did it. I think it was awful today. However, the fact that the right went back 2 years, just seemingly out of kind of nowhere, to cancel her for something, that was not a principled stance. That was about revenge.
Can we say some people on the right and not the right generally? Because my guess is Kevin is like, what the fuck are you talking about? I'm on the right and I didn't do that. I might be speaking for you, Kevin.
Okay. The people who participated in the canceling are the people who I'm referring to. If you did not participate in the canceling, sure. I'm not going to accuse you of coming from an unprincipled position. And even if they had targeted something Chrissy Teigen had done today, I think that's a very different discussion than retroactively canceling her for something she did 2 years ago. So I think it's fine to call people out. And frankly, I think a lot of time it's fine to play the left's game. I think we need to start playing the left's game. And I think we need to get better at playing it than the left. But Agreed. You have to do it from a principled position. You have to remember about why we're doing it. We're not doing it because we think it's fun. We're not doing it because we want to be the bully on the playground to run around and call all the parents who are making their kids wear masks outside child abusers. We're doing it because we actually believe that forcing children to wear masks for hours a day unendingly is child abuse. It's child abuse. Wrong. It's just wrong. And these things should be called out. And I think that we need to stop being afraid of saying precisely what it is. So I think as long as we can ground ourselves in, like, we're not trying to cancel people just because, like, the left cancels people for sport. Yeah. It is a game. It's all about sport.
They get off on it.
They get off on it. Exactly. And I think as long as we can say, listen, we're doing this for the right reasons and we understand what we're doing and we understand how it fits into the bigger picture. And we're comfortable with people getting canceled because we're doing it for a principled reason, not because it's fun.
Yeah. I think when it comes to like the call of culture stuff, there's a difference between calling out, a teacher by doing something you think that they're doing is wrong, or like telling someone who's got their kid at the playground, it's like, hey, your kid's in a mask. It's, my kid's going to go over there and they're not going to have a mask. It doesn't make any sense scientifically. Like that's to me, not calling out. Putting that on Twitter and putting it on Instagram as you're saying it to her, and like putting her face all over it and then putting her kid on Instagram, that's call out culture that's extremely unhealthy. I think there's a bit of a difference between those two. And then sometimes, when a teacher is, acting on a line, it does make sense to film it and put it up. So there's a bit of nuance in there. But I think to be a little bit more unafraid of giving your opinion makes sense, as long as you're not like taking their choice away from them, is absolutely fine. When it comes to like the schools and stuff, I've told this story about, my daughter, and it's still something I have to work with her. She's in third grade, and it took a long time this summer to get her to not wear her mask around the house and to stop putting it on outside.
How old? Give people the age.
She's 8 years old, going to be turning 9 in a couple of months.
And you said around the house.
Yeah, like around the house, she just wear it. She wear it down by her chin, because after a while she figured out that I did not appreciate her doing that. And, so rather than being someone like, that's the problem. And this is also kind of a line between, parenting and child abuse. It's child abuse if you say, take that mask off, you're stupid. That's child abuse.
Yeah.
Parenting is take that mask off because it doesn't make any rational sense. Let me explain to you why. That's what I always try to do with her, so she actually understands why. But when she comes out of, so, it took a week or so to break that habit this summer. Then she goes back to school, and day one, she comes out wearing a mask. She's on her bike with a mask. She's in her house, the mask, or she's going in the car.
8 years old.
Yeah. And she's wearing a mask in the car to go out somewhere else. This is before we do have mask mandates now around here, but before they're re-implemented, she's like, I'm going to put my mask on when we go into the store. I'm like, no, you don't have to put a mask on. It's irrational. She's like, well, there still could be COVID there. I'm like, that's not how this works. Like you need to I have to go into the nuances of risk assessment with her. But
how'd she handle that, by the way?
She got to near the point of crying before
Wow.
I finally convinced her to make sure she keeps it off. And so ever since I broke that habit.
Can I ask a follow-up question? Sorry.
Yeah.
Do you feel that her affinity is probably not the right word, but her desire to do that, was it social, or was it because of the school specifically? In other words, was it because of her friends, or was it because of the school? Like, do you think it's a testament to the strength of the school environment or the social stuff with friends?
I don't know if it's the social stuff, because a lot of her friends don't wear a mask. She's got one friend whose mom was like, he can't come, and wear a mask. We actually have a neighbor. It was kind of funny at the beginning of COVID. My kids were outside riding their bikes, and they asked them to not go into their driveway, to turn around, because they didn't want them coughing on their driveway. But I think it's a fear thing.
As one does.
Yeah. It's a fear thing. I don't think it was a social thing. That kind of came out when she said, well, COVID might be around the shopping, around the grocery store. Which is kind of my biggest fear, kind of. I know social pressures are only mounting as the older they get and go throughout school. But the fear thing is something that I think could stick with you for a bit longer, and definitely has a more profound effect. So now, we're getting to the point where she understands she's not wearing it around the house. And now we have to wear it when we go into a grocery store. So it's kind of like automatic there. But it's going to pick her up at school, and immediately when she gets out of the school, not keeping her mask on until she gets off of school property. I'm like, take it off immediately. You're outside. Doesn't make any sense. Take it off. That's what makes sense. And now it's like slowly getting her to understand, like, unfortunately, this is your school's reality. Now you've just stepped into reality. And that's kind of the way that I'm trying to teach her. It's difficult because there's no, like you said, like the parents can sign a form. Yeah, that's weird, because if it's medical, then, that doesn't make sense. But I wish I had that option. The high school here, I don't think they have that option. They have to be masked. There is no option there. It's teaching them again. It's like, this is really with all things in academia, it's like, this is academia. This is their space. Stuff doesn't really make sense there. It's kind of like the Shimmer, where stuff just like kind of does its own
reality
thing.
distorted.
Yeah, and it's not reality, but once you step outside of that space, you need to understand you're in reality now, and you got to use your own independent brain to make decisions, and you cannot be irrational in your thinking, and you can't fear things all the time, because fear is something that will stunt your growth. Fear is something that will make you make very, very irrational decisions, and I don't want her growing up that way. But that's a little piece with schools that's extremely difficult as a parent is like, you don't have to be afraid. You don't have to follow every rule. That I know, obviously you want your teachers to be some sort of authority figure. You want to look up to them in some capacity, but unfortunately they're teaching you something that either they're forced to teach you, or they have their own beliefs and they're trying to act like they're your parent themselves. But to try to bring them back into reality every single second I can when she's at home.
So what do you guys think about the parents? So it's September 25th. We're almost in October. And by the way, I've been throwing this out as a hypothetical. I don't know if this is reality. Anyone watching this still, comment if you know, or links, please. But I've been throwing it out as a hypothetical that there will be indoor events that parents have to wear masks or show a negative COVID test to attend, to watch their kids. I mean, just one example in LA County, if the kids have to be vaccinated in the high school, like, are the odds of the parents not having to have something in order to show up to watch their kid participate in a sporting event? Or my high school sucked at every sport, but we had a really good dance team, so to watch the dance team perform or whatever, I feel is very small. I will say it's hypothetical because I haven't seen any examples of it. But what do you guys think about the parents in those situations, of what they should do? Kevin, I think your example of you just having that conversation with your daughter is good. Deb has talked about, Deb Philman of The Reason We Learn has talked about these conversations with her kids. And now I think they're both homeschooled, so she doesn't have them as much, but socially is still an issue. And we've seen this with people. Anya, before she moved from California to Montana, talked about how, her kids who are unvaccinated. So I guess just to put a fine point on it, if you're to say you're a parent, here's what you should maybe do in the short term. And here's how you should advise your kid in the short term. Whenever it comes, masks are one thing. I think the vaccine stuff or a negative COVID test for sporting events is a different thing. But just if you were to maybe bullet point your advice for people, what would you guys say? And then I'll give my 2 cents on it as well.
Yeah.
No. Go ahead, Kevin.
Well, I mean, this is a really hard one. I haven't had to step into the reality of going to my kid's sporting event and doing that. But the way I'm thinking about it, the way it's going to be looked at, I can go back to the South Park episode of the drunk dads at the baseball game.
Yeah.
But that's what's going to be seen as. You, without a mask, going to be looked at as that drunk dad who gets mad at the referees during the game. Bad dad. Super embarrassing. But that's the problem. Because it's going to be a two-prong approach. Problem is, one, just getting into the game, being able to watch your kid, and two, your kid not being embarrassed because you're that parent, right?
Yeah.
That's the sucky part. You don't, that's what happens when you have a kid. It's like, I don't want to ruin their upbringing or their experience in school with friends by doing something. And that's also the fear when you speak up during those town hall meetings, is not being like that parent that the kid's going to be embarrassed of. During the time.
But I'm gonna bring it back around to where we started the conversation. Watch this.
Do it.
Would Norm Macdonald care what the other parents thought? If
he had kids, and I don't think he would care. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's exactly the point. It's like, sometimes, I mean, so what? So these bougie, liberal, probably white, like uppity, like Karen women are going to view you as the drunk dad at a football game. Who the hell cares? Who cares?
Yeah.
Like,
they'll talk shit on Nextdoor. Isn't Nextdoor is a thing in the city where you guys, you city folks live?
It's actually really entertaining to be on there.
Okay.
It's more entertaining than it is a burden, but yes. Or you can do double negative and be the drunk dad without a mask. 2 negatives make a positive. Maybe no one will notice you.
Or maybe like
COVID-19 positive.
Maybe view it as a game. Like, view it as a game to piss off as many Karen moms as you can piss off. And like every time you trigger them, that's a point for you and a point subtracted from them. You know, so I think there are a lot of ways that people can play this and think about this, but I don't think the metric of success that we should be judging ourselves off of is, are you going to be accepted by authoritarians?
Right.
Are authoritarians going to give you a pat on the back and a cookie and say, thank you for doing the right thing?
Which unfortunately, authoritarians are the minority. It's the people enabling and Baileying authoritarianism that are the ones that most people have to deal with. And that's what makes this complicated, by the way, is that, and I did this in my video about that when I talked about masks as a religious symbol, where I said most of these conversations are going to be with people who it's like they're low information diet. They're just trying to live their life and taking things at face value. They don't think about this stuff deeply like we do.
Right.
And so you're not going to be dealing with the bad actors. You can say, fuck you, you're not part of this. These are the people that you actually do have to apply some nuance. Like, you can't treat, here's an example. So my brother, who I'll tell you guys a story about this afterwards, but he's like actually thinking about, he still calls himself a socialist, but he wants to dig into F.A. Hayek stuff. Like, seriously. But asking curious questions, you can't treat that person like you would like an AOC or like a person, you know, or what's his name? Jenk's nephew. No, Jenk's nephew, that piece of shit. I forgot what his name is. Anyway, doesn't matter. Like, you can't treat them the same. They're not. And it sucks because they're pushing the same position, but you do actually have to apply some nuance and a little bit of, you know, care and, you know, kid gloves with the people who have no fucking idea what they're advocating for compared to a true believer. You don't have to, but I personally think you ought to, depending on the relationship. So there is that. So
I think too, just to put another point on it, like, there's one thing to like blow up the building, you know, it's like this is a problem, I'm gonna blow up the building. And there's a difference in a situation where they're like, someone comes up to you, is like 50-50 chance your kid's in that building. You still want to blow it up. That's the hard part about the parenting aspect. It's like, I can go and be belligerent and be like, okay, I'm not going to wear a mask and I'll fuck you guys, you know, get kicked out with my middle fingers up is how I'd love to go. But then how many of those parents are gonna be like, all right, my kid's not allowed to hang out with your kid, and how much to destroy their world? That's the harder part.
And how many parents are like, my kid's only hanging out with your kid?
Yeah, they could be. You could be the cool parent. Man, you're
gonna be creating a very good. It's whether you like it or not, it's going to be a fucking awesome sorting mechanism for what parents want to associate their kid with.
Well, and it's also like, I mean, we talked about the fact that like every single person has been through this system where it doesn't enable you to actually build resiliency because they're trying to teach you to be like obedient, right?
Yeah.
There's something to be said for, might it suck for your kid temporarily if all the moms around them say, my kid's not allowed to hang out with your kid? Yes, that might suck. And that's real. And we want to acknowledge that. However, is there also a lesson to be learned there in terms of unapologetically standing up for what you believe in, even when there are consequences to, I mean, like, standing up for what you believe in, frankly, only matters when there are consequences. Like, if you can go and say, like, there's no, it doesn't mean anything for a Karen mom to go to a school board meeting and go, guys, let's all wear masks and protect the everyone else from COVID. That means literally nothing, because there's everyone already agrees with them already, and like nothing has changed. And you know, so that's not really, I don't consider that a brave act. It is a much braver act to go into that school board meeting and say, you know, these masks are ridiculous. There is no godly reason that kids should be wearing them, and we should need to get rid of this mask mandate immediately. That might come with consequences, but you stood up for what you believed in, and you did it in a way that, like, that's when it matters. So
I think that's good
temporarily, but you know, they'd be learning something in the long run, and maybe they learn how to find new friends.
And that it sucks temporarily is a thing. You know, if I was gonna say one of the themes of just this episode and what people need to take away from from all of this is there is no scenario where the decision you make is not going to have a burden attached to it. There's either going to be a burden to compliance in that there's that kind of part of yourself that you're compromising and you're like, and you have to be okay with, I hope you're not, but you have to be okay with breeding compromise instead of discipline or courage or whatever you want to use. On the other side of it, there's a burden with experiencing something that I know that all of us have experienced. And that's the social burden of standing, like you said, Karlyn, standing up for what you believe in and experiencing the ramifications of that. Like there's consequences. There just is. That was one of the things when I was talking to my brother, this is like, I think 2 nights ago, talked forever. And he had went back, he was like listening to like all my, like on Spotify and stuff, all my old stuff, I think the most recent episode that I have on Spotify or Apple or on podcasts is like 1.5 years old. But that's who he was listening to it on. But he said he listened to like 4 or 5 hours worth of stuff. And he's someone who self-identifies as a socialist. And one of the things I told him is that I really appreciated him listening to it honestly. And I tried to walk him through the social cost. And I did quote Nicki Minaj, actually, of saying, like, dude, you have no idea what the cost is of just someone who starts asking questions. Like you have no idea. And that's why, Karlyn, one of the things you mentioned earlier about how a lot of people on the right don't understand this stuff. This isn't a thing against you, Kevin. Yeah, I think you're in the minority here. Yeah. But I've said for a long time that people who are traditionally from the left are fighting the hardest against this stuff because we have a specific perspective and experience here that lends itself to this situation. And explained to my brother that, like, dude, you don't know what it's like to lose so many friends and have so many relationships just get fucked from even just asking questions. Like, dude, you have no idea. You have no idea. And I was trying to tell him, like, I appreciated him honestly engaging with the stuff that I was doing. My point is that people have to understand, like I said at the beginning, that there is a burden, there's a cost to either side that they take, whether it's I'm going to go along to get along or finding some middle ground. And I don't think that there isn't, I think that there's middle grounds that make sense, by the way. I'm not trying to denigrate those things. Or going full bore and saying, no, I'm not going to do this. There's a social cost. There will be. That people just have to understand that their social landscapes are going to change. It's going to be a sorting. It's going to be a thing where it's like, people I thought were my friends maybe aren't my friends. It is what it is. But people have to understand that. And if they don't understand that there's going to be, and to something you said also at the beginning, Karlyn, that there's a cost to remaining silent. Mm-hmm. There's a cost to inaction. That no matter what they do, there's going to be a cost. They just have to be aware of it. They have to mentally. So to anyone, still here to try to bring it to a close somewhat. There's a cost to literally everything you do. There's a cost to action. There's a cost to inaction. There's a cost to every various type of action. Some of them are social. Some of them are emotional. Some of them are both. Some of them will be costs that you bear primarily. Some of them are costs that will be dissipated among you and your family and your kids and all these other things. But anyone that doesn't think there is a cost to this, be it through inaction or action, is naive to it. And I'm sorry, it just is what it is. It's not about, like you said earlier, it's not about whether it's easy or comfortable or fun. It's about whether it's necessary. And so people have to figure out what the necessary thing is for them. With their kids, and this is the last thing I'll say, and I'll kick it to you guys to kind of give whatever final thoughts you have. In the short term with your work, I think that you have to ask yourself, you have to do that cost analysis. I've mentioned this before, but Jesus has that this, I think it's in Matthew. I'm trying to remember. I can't remember the exact chapter. It didn't matter. Well, it does matter, but it doesn't matter for this context. Where he said, no one sets out to build a building without first counting the cost. They count the cost and then they decide if it's worth it. Everyone who's in these situations asking, what should I do, needs to count the cost on both sides, the do and the not do. And then everything on the do spectrum. Do I do this, or this? You need to count the costs, and you need to talk to the people who it's going to impact. I think, Kevin, that's a great example you're talking about with your daughter. I think that you do have to count the cost and walk through those things with your daughter, with your wife. Hey, what do I want to do here? Karlyn, if you happened to be in a situation, now you robustified, you did the right thing, and that's what you're trying to get people to do. Mm-hmm. People have to walk through those things with whoever their decisions are going to impact and count the cost and try to process that and figure it out. You might not know what it is, but you might figure it out by talking to the person who it'll maybe impact more or in a way that you haven't thought about. Mm-hmm. But regardless, my personal advice to people is to, one, count the cost, and then two, fucking do something. Decide, like, make a decision and go with it and stand by it, but don't stand by and do nothing. Don't stand by and just let it happen to you. By the way, even if that decision is to do nothing, at least say it was an active decision to do that you weighed all of your options. Mm-hmm. But people have to go through that process. Whether it's at work, whether it's at school, especially if you have kids who it's going to impact them socially. You have to have those conversations and bring them in, because it's not just about you. It's about saying it's not just your social landscape that might change. It's your kids' social landscape that might change or will definitively change. But people have to count the cost and make a decision, because as we've mentioned 100,000 times before, there's no sitting on the bench anymore. There just isn't, unfortunately. And this is the reality of the time that we're in. So I don't know if that makes sense. You guys can tell me, hey, Truman, that was some weird bullshit. If you want to change that, you can. Otherwise, I'll kick it to you guys of just any final thoughts or just philosophical. I know what's kind of cool about this is that we're all in different areas of life and different situations. And so we have different perspectives about it. So I do like that, but kick it to you guys. You guys can do whatever you want with anything I just said, or none of it, whatever.
Well, I think you can tell how long we've been talking based on the light in my room is now much dimmer than when we started.
It is.
But I mean, my thoughts on this are like, I want to go back to kind of where I started, which is people have got to start building their own businesses. You have got to start building your own system that can sustain you. And, it can seem like an overwhelming thing. And I'm not speaking from a place of like, I don't want to make it seem like you snap your fingers and you have a business, but I am speaking from a place of having actually done this before. And so like when I built my business, it was because I knew I hated working for other people and I wanted to be able to work for myself and do whatever I wanted and not have to answer to other people. And so I just started by slowly saying, what services do I have that are marketable? How can I put myself out there? How much money do I need to sustain myself? How much money can I bring in part-time while I'm also continuing to work in my full-time job? And just being very strategic about it. Everyone has something they can do. Every single person has something they can do.
That's good.
I mean, think about an old friend of mine. Actually, I worked with him at my very first like official job out of college, and wearing like suit and tie to work and all this stuff. Very respectable job. He ended up washing windows because he hated working in an office environment. He hated like having to wear a suit and tie to work every day. He wanted to do something outside, and so he ended up leaving his corporate job to go wash windows in one of those places where like they lower you from the crane down the side of the building. And so it doesn't seem like much to say like he's washing windows, but guess what? Now he has his own window washing business. Like you don't like you can take almost any skill and make money off it. You can open a doggy daycare, be like
is that a thing?
Yes, it absolutely is a thing. Like walk dogs in your spare time. Like you can come walk my dogs. I suck at walking my dogs. Come walk my dogs. I'll pay you to do it. But like I'm trying to articulate like you don't need a super rare skill set in order to build a business. You just need to understand what types of services do people need, how can I fulfill that need, and then just start putting stuff out there and allow it to grow over time. And when I really made the decision to work for myself, what I did was I said, how much money do I need to quit my job right now to feel comfortable that I'm going to give myself enough runway in order to build my business? And I came up with a budget and I came up with a plan to meet that number. So none of this is rocket science. All it really requires is the desire to do it. Every single person out there can do this. And it truly is like making your own money and empowering yourself and not having to answer someone else. I truly believe that's the only type of freedom that exists. It's the only way that you can ever speak out on the subject that you want to speak out on. It's the only way you can always be sure. Like if my YouTube went away tomorrow and my locals went away tomorrow, which we know it won't because it won't, like I still know that I can go and build a business and make money. And just that sheer knowledge that you can put your services out there to offer to the world and you can get paid for them, that's going to take you anywhere. So get started now. If you didn't start at the beginning of the pandemic when you damn well should have, start now.
Can I ask you a question really fast? You said anyone can do this.
Yeah.
What happens to the person who, this is a hypothetical, but I think this actually applies to a lot of people because Walmart is the largest non-government employer of American citizens. Mm-hmm. Walmart's requiring masks, vaccines for all new hires, masks for every employee, and I think vaccines for all store managers. And they have these weird fluctuating requirements, like if you're in an area where COVID is surging, using whatever criteria. Mm-hmm. What happened? My point is what if you work in a profession where you actually don't have some amazing skills? So what would you say to those people?
What type of skills does it take to be a dog walker?
Fair enough.
I mean, honestly,
so I think
legs,
legs and the desire to do it. What types of skills does it take? Like, I'm not going to say that like painting houses isn't a skill. I'm sure it is a skill. I sure as heck can't do it. But learn how to go paint a house.
Yeah, I
will say doing trim work well is a skill. But
while listening to an audiobook while doing a review, yeah, it's definitely a skill.
Yeah,
I would actually say the less specific your skill set is, the better chance you have to do this. The more specific, like I'm an engineer, the more I get into my specific field, the less opportunity I have to just jump out and go somewhere else. Like your friend said, I'm in a very specific field. I don't know if I can do it anywhere else. That's what happens. You get in a very specific field. It's not as easy, not impossible, but so I would argue the people at Walmart probably have a better opportunity to do something else than most other people can.
I mean, why can't the people at Walmart think about like, maybe they start by like selling stuff on an online store or whatever, or they set up a little general store in their community. I mean, like I'm just making stuff up, but like, working in a Walmart teaches you certain skills. It teaches you like, how to stock stuff on shelves, how to like set up displays, how to like, but like, let's not discount that because like, I don't know how to set up a display in a store. I have no effing idea, but I bet someone who works at Walmart does.
Presumably. Yeah. No, you're not wrong. No, I was just trying to put myself in that situation. Like we want to appeal to as many people as possible.
But I think so. My answer to your question kind of was a little bit with Karlyn's, but this more broad, I guess, is again going back to Hayek. It's choice. This is what gives you your individual freedom, is choice. And when that choice. That choice must be yours. And when that choice is curtailed by coercion, then it's less your choice. And what happens when you go down that path? When you go down the path of not having your own choices, you start to get dispassionate with a lot of different things. And if you think you're going to stay in that field and remain passionate because you want to stay in that field and you want to remain passionate, you're going to start to lose that if you cannot make your own choices. So in the end, you're going to end up wanting to exit that field that you had to go through all these things you didn't want to. You had to bend the knee that many times to stay in a field you're going to get dispassionate about anyways. It's better to go do your own thing and become passionate about something else. Because that's I think the biggest element of starting your own business. You got to be passionate about it. I
agree with that. Yeah. And I think, don't discount your hobbies either, to be honest. Cause like, maybe you do cool blacksmith work in your spare time in your garage. Like you can make a business out of that. teach other people how to do cool blacksmith work.
True.
I mean, like, people just need to be creative about this. Like, if you have a skill, and I firmly believe that everyone has a skill, everyone has their own particular brand of genius. If they just want to allow themselves to access it, figure out what it is. Maybe it's taking, you know, shots of whiskey on the side, and you can do a whole like whiskey tour around your town or something. I don't know what it is.
Yeah, I can't personally understand or identify with that, but yeah, no, that does seem like an interesting side. What'd you say? Side hustle?
Yeah,
Karlyn, right?
Great,
Side
great
hustle.
whiskey tour around your town where you're bringing people to go all the good whiskey spots, and you just get drunk on a Saturday afternoon, but they paid you to bring them around the town.
That's right. Actually, so my wife and I went to Gatlinburg after I finished my master's, and we went to Gatlinburg, Tennessee, which is in eastern Tennessee, and they have all these like moonshine distilleries where you can go and like taste test moonshine, or it's like, how do you taste test moonshine?
Now it's
You
gonna
take a
go
shot of
downhill
it.
real quick.
Yeah,
fruit
exactly.
in it.
Yeah, it's gonna go downhill real quick. That's the right answer. You can put fruit in it, Kevin,
I have a friend who makes good
and
moonshine,
then it's gonna
but,
go
yeah,
downhill real quick.
put it in.
So so we did that. But to your point, Karlyn, you can do that anyway. So anyone who's again still watching this, hey Kevin, I had an idea. I don't know if it's a well-inspired idea. You want to tell the moth joke?
Oh man, I'm not going to remember all the specific details. Of
I
the
can
moth
remember
joke.
it, but do you think it's a good idea to tell the moth joke?
If you can do it at the right, I don't have a good. I know you don't have to do the Norm impression, do it. And the moth joke actually isn't originally Norm's joke, by the way. It was a friend's joke.
Yeah,
but yeah, if you can do it successfully, I'll play
Karlyn,
Conan.
are you
and I'll
okay
just
with
listen.
the joke?
I'm
hear
okay.
a joke?
I would love to hear the joke, Truman. Do it.
Okay.
I'll play Conan. I'll just listen. Are you
Are
done
you
yet?
gonna get to the?
Yeah. Oh, you're still going. Okay.
Yeah. How much fucking makeup does Conan put on? And doesn't matter.
How much hair
Okay.
product? Things sticking up. out
Hair
there.
product.
Okay.
Okay. So this moth goes into a podiatrist's office, and he says, "Let me tell you what's going on with me." And podiatrist is like, "I want to hear it. Yeah, tell me. I want to hear your symptoms." Moss says, "Oh God, okay." He sits down and he's just like, "Where do I begin?" Okay. So first of all, I work at the plant. That's where most people work. Your kids probably work at the plant, and the podiatrist is like, "Yeah." And he's like, "I work there. I've worked for this man, Mr. Borysenko. We'll go with that. It's a very uncommon name. I work for him. I've worked for him every day for 35 years. I wake up, eat my breakfast, go to work, come home. So it is. And it started out as an okay gig, and it's gotten progressively harder, progressively worse." And podiatrist says, "Well, what's made it worse?" Well, he says, "Well, for starters, there was that plague that came through, the COVID Delta variant. You could go with that if you want, whatever plague." And the moth says, "I lost little Timmy." Many people lost their version of little Timmy to the Delta variant. We lost our son, our youngest son. I don't know if we'll ever recover from that. I know you can identify with it, and I kept going to work every day that I could. On top of that, I have an emotional, we'll call it a situation, where I wake up and I know I lost Timmy. I know I did. I know everyone lost their version of Timmy to the Delta variant. But I know I'm not the moth that I used to be, because I wake up and I look in the mirror. I get ready. I care about my job. I care about my presentation or my performance. And I look in the mirror and all I see is shame. I see my son that I lost, and I wonder what I could have done different. And then I go to work, and my boss, who used to respect me, when I got hired there was all this talk about who I could be, the moth I could be, of the management position I could hold. I could have ran the whole company. And I know my boss sees that I'm not the moth I used to be. And I look in that mirror before I go to work, and I know that I'm not the moth that I used to be, and I don't have the potential that I used to have. And I go to work regardless, because I have to. And because we've all lost our version of Timmy. And then I come home, and what do I see? I see my wife, and she looks at me, and she immediately looks away. And I know it's because, one, she sees our son, that my own inadequacies cost his life. And she also sees, well, less so, she sees the moth I used to be. She sees the potential that I used to have. And she sees that I did not live up to it, or maybe even try to. I don't know. But I can see that she doesn't respect me anymore. And I see her face. I see our daughter's face, and our daughter has a version of that. And I can see that she wonders what happened to her older brother. And I can tell that no one around me, whether it's my boss or my wife or our kid, have the same respect. For me, it's not just respect, it's the expectation of who I could have been and who I am. And I wish I could actually wake up, and instead of looking in the mirror and having that going to work and coming back, I wish I could just put the shotgun that I have by our bed in my mouth and pull the trigger and end all of it. I wish I could do that, because I know I'd be doing a service for my family. And the only reason I don't is because I don't lack the courage. I don't lack the spine. I'm not a moth of courage. I'm not a moth who has what it takes to do what's right. And so instead, I just am in this cycle of shame and deprecation and doubt and self-hatred. And I don't know what to do about it. And the podiatrist says, holy shit, there's a lot there. And I'm really sorry you're experiencing that. Why on earth did you come in here? I'm a podiatrist, dude. What am I supposed to do for you? And the moth is kind of staring off in the distance, thinking about it. And he stops. He says, why did I come in here? The light was on. Light was on.
There we go. That was definitely the Truman twist onto that, but yeah. Good joke.
Anyway.
Well done, Truman. A nice tribute.
I don't know if it was a tribute or not. Kevin, I'll ask you what you think.
It's good.
Karlyn, I'm glad you laughed at least.
Yeah. You didn't laugh through any of it out? I felt bad because I was like laughing because if you know the punchline, you're laughing at all the horrible things.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
You just look like a horrible person.
I kind of figured that was what the punchline was.
Yes,
gonna be.
but
And
that's
that's something you can see coming about.
That's the art of Norm, is you know what's gonna happen. He just like makes you wait for it though.
I didn't get to that thorny issue thing. That was his answer to. We'll end it with Norm again. I don't care.
I bet his version of the Aristocrats was like 18 minutes long.
He didn't do the Aristocrats.
No,
he didn't do it. Saget's was hilarious. It was about someone smashing a dick in a drawer and turning it flat as a fly swatter. I remember it because that's a hilarious movie. Norm didn't do the Aristocrats. But the thorny issue thing from Norm that I mentioned way earlier, that was his answer to Mark Twain and Huckleberry Finn. So he's like, well, it's a thorny issue using these words in this book. It's a thorny, and you could tell Conan's like, that's one of the beauties of Norm, is he could frustrate the shit out of you and he'd get you really exasperated. It's like, what is it, Norm? And you can see it in Conan. And then finally Norm says, well, you make Tom Sawyer black. And then it doesn't matter how he refers to, was it Jim, I think. Anyway,
yeah.
He's like, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
You make Tom Sawyer black. It's like 6 minutes to get him to, because it's a thorny issue. It's a thorny, and Conan's like, what the fuck is this going, dude? Anyway.
So I could give you my paraphrase favorite
Do
one
it.
from the book that I think he
Do
said
it.
doing stand-up. It was just one of the things he's right. One of the parts leading up to a different story he's telling in the book is when he met God. So he's like, I met God.
Okay.
And I get up to heaven and he talks in God's voice and yours, and people are always say like, why is God a man? Is God a woman? Is he black? Is he white?
Definitely black.
And these things don't matter when you meet God. Those things don't matter. He was a white guy, by the way. And then this kid goes on, like, just drops in. He was a white guy, by the way. And then just keeps going. And it was just, I think I've seen him doing that on stand-up, but that like sincerity and then going to like the punchlines, but going back, it's like, yeah, the obvious thing. Okay. There you go.
Just so you know.
Yeah. All right. Yeah.
That's good.
A bunch of great ones in this book, though.
That's good. All right. I'll let you guys, Karlyn and then Kevin and then me, give your final departing thoughts, where people can find you, assuming anyone's still watching or listening to this after that fucking ridiculous run. It doesn't matter. Anyway, go ahead. Let's do our final words.
I don't know. My final words, I feel like I've already kind of said them. People have to take responsibility for themselves. And, you cannot expect people to do the work for you if you are unwilling to do it yourself. If you already think, oh, there are enough people speaking up. No, there aren't. And you have to participate. And again, don't expect those people that are speaking up to continue to do it when they're the ones taking the bullets for people that are not speaking up, because eventually it does get exhausting after a while and they're going to go, why am I doing this? No one else seems to care anyway. So everyone's got to take responsibility for creating the type of experience that they want. Sometimes that involves making hard decisions. Sometimes that involves making hard choices. But the very minimal thing that it does involve is being honest with yourself about the results of what your actions are contributing to. So that's kind of like my final word. You can find me on YouTube. You can find me on Locals, kb.locals.com.
Were you on Twitter?
Yeah.
Can you give your Twitter handle?
Twitter. I guess so.
Sure.
Dr. Karlyn B on Twitter. But Twitter is a hellscape. Not as bad as Gab though. Gab is
yeah.
Never been
go
there.
look at my Gab. My Gab is fun right now. I'll tell you what.
I won't. I'm not on Gab, so I don't know.
Yeah, I think my final thoughts, the final thought I've had similar to a lot of these final thoughts is freedom is not the default human condition. Don't pretend it is. Don't think because it's in America, that can be the installation between you and authoritarianism. you have to stand up for your principles. You can't just expect your principles to stand by themselves when you abandon them, and you just say, okay, I'm going to bend the knee this one time, and then maybe the next time, at some point you got to stand up for what you believe in. That's my final thought. You can find me at engineeringpolitics.locals.com, at ENG_politics on Twitter, and the Search Engineering Politics YouTube, ThinkSpot, Medium for some written stuff. Hopefully I can get back to doing some written stuff soon, but that's where you can find me.
Sweet. I'll say again to anyone watching this, is if this is your first interaction with Ember, James Darien of the Commutation Construct podcast, he's the one who set all this up. And there's a part of me, and you guys can tell me if you identify with this. It's like one of those things when it's like, oh shit, it's time for another Ember one. There's a part of me that goes, okay, I got to think about this. But then when we're in it, I'm like, this is awesome. I love talking to you guys about this stuff. So James, you're awesome. Thank you for doing this. Thank you for setting this up. And to anyone who's watching this, it's your first time, please do sub to James at commutationconstruct.locals.com. And then I don't know what his Twitter is, probably James Darien or Commutation Construct, one of those two.
And this whole Ember thing is also, I think,
Ember is on Locals.
Yeah.
That's correct.
Yeah.
That's right. So I'll say that. Second thing, my final thought is, dude, I agree with both you guys. You guys nailed this pretty well. People need to understand what time it is. People need to do the math, count the cost, and then do it, whatever it is. But they need to understand that whatever they do, they're going to have to stand by or defend whatever, even if it's inaction, by the way. They're going to have to understand there's consequences of it. And it sucks ass. This is the time we're in. It is. It just is. I'm not real thrilled with it personally. But there's a cost to anything you do. There's a cost to anything you do. There's a cost to you personally. There's a cost to your family. There's a cost to your kids if you have them. There's a cost. You need to count the cost and then decide if it's worth it. There's this horrible movie called The Girl Next Door that came out when I was in high school, when Kevin was in middle school, when Karlyn was maybe a freshman in college. And it has Timothy Oliphant in it. And one of the themes and one of the final scenes has this notion about, is the juice worth the squeeze? And the point is what you do or don't do worth the fruit, worth the product, worth the consequences? Understand that where we're at right now in time, there is a calculus, and you have to decide, is the juice worth the squeeze? Or is it worth me not doing anything, but that there's consequences on either side of it? Like Karlyn mentioned, there's consequences to inaction as well. So count the cost, do the math, and decide for yourself, but be willing to stand by that and make sure it's something you're okay with personally or as a family group or whatever. That's it for me. I'm Truman, returntoreason.locals.com, at My Mundane Mind on Twitter, and then on YouTube. If you just type into YouTube, someone who rates Beanie Baby textures, I do that as well. So any of those Beanie Babies, they have different textures. You don't know, the thread count is very different. Karlyn's seriousness can tell you how I know that Bloodhound Beanie Baby I sent you, Karlyn, you said the thread count was quite nice.
It was.
And I include,
True.
He was. That was buried.
Please leave him 5 stars on Yelp.
Please leave me 5 stars on Yelp. Holy shit. Return to Reason everywhere. It doesn't matter. James, we miss you. Hope you found a good venue in Florida, if that's possible. And that's all I got. You guys got anything else?
I think that's the perfect way to wrap it up, Truman. I think it's good. Yeah.
Let's do it. All right. Thanks everyone for watching. We will see you next time. Peace.
See ya.